Hey, lady, are you all right? The question came from the first woman in line. She sported an oversized Redskins t-shirt, a bag of popcorn, and a giant panda. Sooner searched for the man, but already he'd vanished into the crowds. Whoever Mr. Creepazoid was, he was gone now. Grady had said the article would jostle the nuts out of the trees. She considered telling Grady, but hesitated. Soon she'd be on her own and would have to handle situations like this alone. And calling Rock off, well, a lifetime distrust in cops was a hard habit to break. Fuck.
"What did you say?"
said Redskins lady. Realizing she'd broken character, she straightened her shoulders. If Grady had taught her one thing, it was that it was the illusion that kept them in business. So sorry, I was chasing away the evil spirits. So can I get my reading? Redskins lady said. Yes, darling, please enter. Heart still pounding, she made a grand sweep of her hands and vanished into the tent. It was past 1 a.m. when Grady was able to sit at his desk and plow through the night's earnings. Judging by the stack of cash and credit card receipts, it had been a very good night. He had known Sooner would be the draw that he needed. The girl was just coming into her own, and her beauty and her talent with people could make her a grand draw for years to come. Years to come. He reached for the tumbler full of whiskey and drained half of it. He didn't have years. He had months if he was lucky. He glanced at the piles of cash, skimmed a couple hundred of the smaller bills away, and shoved them in his pocket. He wrote up the bank deposit slip, which he'd drop off in the morning. When his work was complete, he glanced at the clock. 3:14. He should be tired. The doc in Nashville had told him to sleep more, but his head buzzed. Sleep had become harder and harder in the last year, and tonight he'd be lucky to get an hour or two. Glancing at his unmade bunk with a bit of resentment, he rose and moved to the window that overlooked the carnival. A few trailers remained lit up, and the sound of music drifted from Buster's trailer, but all in all, the place was quiet. He moved to the safe, opened the door, and dropped in the bank deposit bag. He was about to close the safe door when he spotted the folder in the bottom. Digging it out, he locked the safe and went to the dinette. He refilled his scotch before he sat down. Opening the file, he leafed through the yellowed newspaper articles. Woman found slain, Raleigh. Hiker drowned, Charleston. Woman raped and murdered, Nashville. There were at least 24 articles like these three. All featured women in the Southeast who'd been kidnapped, held, and then violently murdered. The cities and times had been scattered enough that the cops in the different jurisdictions did not realize they were dealing with the same killer, but he knew. Slowly, he turned each article over and over until he reached the last that he'd clipped out just days ago. The article featured Diane Young. Chapter 13. Monday, October 25th, 9:15 a.m. Charlotte's legs ached as she hurried up the courthouse's front steps. The last couple of days had been a blur of work. Friday's client dinner had gone well, and she'd spent the entire weekend drawing up contracts. He wasn't a huge fish, but the work fees would help. Breaks had centered on visiting the new apartment, determining what she could keep, calling the clerk on the White case, and making sure the movers were ready to pack up her life on Friday. She pushed through the glass front doors and hurried over to the line at security. She dumped her purse and briefcase in the bin and sent it through the scanner as she ducked under the sensors. The buzzer beeped, and she glanced at the security guard, a tall black man with a shaved head and stern expression. Without being told, she moved forward and held up her arms as he rose off his stool with his wand. "Morning, Miss Wellington." She smiled and tried not to look impatient. "Morning, Oscar. How's it going?" "It's going just about like any other Monday." "That sounds ominous." He brushed the wand and paused at her belt. She glanced at the large buckle and rolled her eyes. "Sorry, I wasn't even thinking today." "No, just a lot of harmless fun." Moving backward, she dumped her belt in a bin and sent it through the scanner. This time when she walked through, no alarm beeped. "All clear." He watched as she refastened her belt and grabbed her purse and briefcase. "I'd say by those dark circles under your eyes you could use a fun weekend." "I never have fun, Oscar. Life is about work for me." Lately, she'd envied people like Oscar who could leave work behind and just break free. The only time she'd really acted without analyzing had been her nights with Rockoff. Now she couldn't even think about him without considering complications. "So I hear the jury is back today." "It is." It had been 7 days since the judge had given the jury instructions in the Samantha White case. Never in those 7 days was the case far from her mind, and though the lengthy deliberations were a good sign, the constant worry was chewing up her stomach. "You always got work on the brain." "Always." "You're too young and pretty not to have some fun." The avuncular comment had her shrugging. "Tell that to the workload. When it eases up, I will too." "The work is always going to be there, Miss Wellington. Always." As much as she'd earned a bit more fun, she'd never resented the work or viewed it as a bad thing. Work meant money, and money meant freedom. And if she didn't have time to spend her money, then so be it. "I'll keep that in mind." The good humor of the moment quickly passed as she moved through the throng of people toward the elevators. She had a half hour before court, which was time enough to talk to Levi, who'd requested another meeting. She found the prosecutor in the conference room. He sat at the head of the table, his head bent over an open case file. He made quick, abrupt notes with his left hand. A line furrowed his brow. "Levi," she said, "you wanted to meet before court?" He glanced up, and smoothing his hand down his red tie, he rose and pulled out a chair for her. "Glad you could meet me." The soft scent of his aftershave wafted around him. As always, he was impeccably dressed in hand-tailored suits that drew attention to his lean waist. She'd heard he was a bit of a gym rat, but seeing as she'd never set foot in a gym, their paths weren't likely ever to cross. She leaned back in her chair, noting the way the hard back dug into her spine. "What do you have?" "Involuntary manslaughter. She serves 4 years." Charlotte was shocked by such a generous deal. "My client doesn't want any deals." "This is a great deal and can end this now." "It is over. The jury is back." "Take the deal and we both win." "My client loses 4 years of her life." Levi was a tough nut, and for him to cave was surprising. "She's made it clear. No deal." He knitted his fingers and leaned forward. "Charlotte, I'm not trying to be a hard ass. I feel for this woman. I don't want to see her suffer any more than you do." "You sure tried to put her away." "That's my job, and believe me, I did not enjoy it." "It was a good deal. Let me place a call to the bailiff." She dialed, and within minutes was on the phone with Samantha. As she suspected, the woman turned it down. Charlotte turned off her phone. "She says no." "You both could regret this." "I don't think so. See you in court." The butterflies churning her stomach had her glancing at her watch as she moved down the hallway. She had 15 minutes to showtime. Showtime. Funny she could think of court like showtime. That was the term her mother had used as she'd left for her carnival shows. "Mom, you look tired." Mom finished underlining her right eye. "Really? I'm feeling great, kiddo." "Can't you take a night off? We can watch a movie and eat popcorn. We've not done that in a long time." "Kiddo, Mama can't say no to work because work is what keeps us together." "One night won't make a difference." "One night leads to 2 nights, and then before you know it, you're out of a job. I'll work until the day I die." Until the day I die. She'd suffered her stroke 2 weeks later. Charlotte pushed through the double doors of the courtroom and moved to the defense table. The next few minutes moved along on a steady, predictable course. The bailiff arrived. Deputies escorted in Samantha White, who took her seat by Charlotte. Levi took his seat. The courtroom filled, the jury took their seats, and the judge arrived. Judge Winston Lawless struck his gavel against his bench and announced court proceedings to begin. Black robes broadened the appearance of his shoulders and accentuated dark hair combed back from stern features. In his late 40s, he'd earned a reputation as a hard ass. Charlotte's back was to the courtroom door, but without turning, she knew the instant Rockoff arrived. She couldn't say how she knew, only that the energy in the room had changed. It felt more charged, almost as if it buzzed with force. Charlotte kept her expression neutral, and she didn't dare turn and look to confirm his arrival. But the muscles in her body tensed, and she kept aligning her pencil with her yellow legal pad. "Will the defendant rise?" Charlotte and Samantha rose. Samantha dared a glance back, searching for her mother, who had returned from the beach but had not come to the courthouse for the verdict. Carefully, she smoothed the wrinkles from her prison jumpsuit. Charlotte took her hand and squeezed it. "Members of the jury," the judge said, "have you reached a verdict?" A short man with graying hair and a red tie stood. "We have, Your Honor." The foreman handed a slip of paper to the bailiff. The judge received the paper and read it. He frowned, nodded. "What is your verdict?" "On the count of arson, we the jury find the defendant not guilty." Charlotte and Samantha both remained rigid. "And on the count of first-degree murder," Judge Lawson said, "we find the defendant innocent." As a frowning Judge Lawless read his final instructions, a whimper escaped across Samantha's lips, and she leaned forward and buried her face in her hands. She started to weep. Charlotte tipped her head back, savoring the rush of this victory, and then wrapped her arm around her client. "Thank you so much." Samantha looked up at her with red, watery eyes. "Thank you so much." Charlotte smiled, knowing she often came across as cold and unfeeling. "You are very welcome." "You've saved my life." Charlotte smiled. "I'm glad to have helped." She watched the bailiff lead Samantha away and then hurried out of the courtroom quickly. She paused briefly to talk to reporters and then hurried toward the exit. She had just cleared the courthouse steps when she heard her name. "Wellington, I want a word with you." The masculine voice was rich with anger. Irritated by the rude delay, more than fearful, Charlotte turned and faced the man. "Can I help you?" Tall and thin, he wore khakis, a white shirt, and work boots. He'd slicked back his dark hair and sharply parted it on the right side. "You can tell me why you helped that witch get free?" He closed the gap between them until he stood only inches from her. This close, Charlotte could smell the hint of gasoline and motor oil on the man's flannel shirt and jeans. "Do I know you?" "I'm Lonnie White. Samantha killed my brother." And then she could see the resemblance. She didn't focus much of her research on Lonnie because reports indicated he'd been living in Atlanta for the last several years. What facts she'd gathered ticked back. Auto repairman, married, military service with a general discharge. Lonnie and his brother hadn't been close. "I didn't notice you in the courtroom during the trial." "I'm here now." He weighed at least 100 pounds more, and he was a good 6 inches taller. "Hell of a show you put on in there. Made Samantha look like a fucking saint." Ah, profanity, the language of scholars. "I've got better things to do than have this conversation, Mr. White." She turned to cut around him toward the street corner, but he blocked her path. Clenched fists hovered at his side. "She killed him because she wanted the insurance money. She looks sweet and nice, but she is evil." The jury did not agree. "Now, get out of my way, Mr. White." A muscle in his jaw clenched. "Not until you've heard me out, bitch." Her grip tightened on her briefcase. She glanced around at the crowds of people milling in front of the courthouse. "I've heard all I want to hear. Get out of my way." Each word was clipped and direct. He shook his head. "Bitch, you made my brother look like a monster in that courtroom. He was a good, decent man who worked hard and who loved his wife and kids." Anger, egged on by impatience, blurred her judgment. "He was a monster, Mr. White. He was having an affair with a woman at his office and wanted to marry her, but instead of asking for a divorce, he sealed every window in his house and then set it on fire. His plan was to burn the house down with his wife and children inside. Samantha hit him with that golf club because he stood between her and the only remaining exit out the house. Yeah, I'd say he was a hell of a great guy." "Whore. Bitch." "Get out of my way, now." His fists clenched tighter as he raised them. "I read about you. Too bad that guy didn't kill you a couple of years ago. Scum like you and Samantha don't deserve to live." The pure venom dripping from the words had her retrenching. Charlotte's temper had skewed her judgment, and she'd miscalculated the danger. She took a step back, but bumped into a solid wall of muscle. Strong hands settled on her shoulders and immediately moved her out of Lonnie's reach. She didn't have to turn to know who had her back. Rockoff's scent gave him away. "Is there a problem here?" Rockoff said. Lonnie's face paled with more fury. "Someone needs to teach this woman a lesson. Samantha White is not a fucking saint. She's evil." Rockoff's dark sunglasses made it impossible to see his eyes, but his braced stance and hand on his hip next to his gun holster telegraphed menace. "Are you threatening, Ms. Wellington?" Lonnie's eyes narrowed. "I ain't making threats." "Then what are you doing? Looks like threats to me." Lonnie's sudden grin revealed several missing teeth. "I ain't like Samantha. I ain't a curse on the world." "Then what are you doing here?" "Hearing the verdict." Charlotte stepped around Rockoff. "I was doing my job. Read your Bill of Rights, Lonnie. We are all entitled to a defense." "Not whores like Samantha." The veins in Lonnie's neck bulged. "She deserves to be burned at the stake." "I'm telling you to back off and find a spot to cool down." Rockoff shifted his stance in front of Charlotte. "One more word out of you and I'll arrest you." "On what charge?" he challenged. "I'll find one," Rockoff said. "And when he's done making a list of his offenses, I'll add a few of my own," she said. Lonnie shifted his gaze to Charlotte. "Sure, Ms. Wellington, sure, I'll back down." He even managed a gap-toothed grin. "I'm just blowing smoke." "Be very sure about that," Rockoff said, "or I swear I'll be the first to haul your ass to jail." "Yeah, whatever." Lonnie waved his hand, turned on his heel, and hurried down the steps. He soon vanished around a corner. "Thanks," Charlotte said. "I didn't diffuse his temper so well. I should have known better." His glasses tossed back her reflection. "You're good at stirring the pot." "It's why I get paid the big bucks." "You didn't get paid this go-around." "Old habits die hard." The danger had passed, the adrenaline had dwindled, and suddenly she felt shaky. She didn't quite trust her legs to work and hesitated, hoping a small delay would help her gain equilibrium. "Thanks again." "You all right?" His gaze all but burned through the sunglasses. "Me? Sure. I think the guy just caught me by surprise, and I'm not so fond of surprises." "You're headed to your office?" "Yes." "I'll walk with you." "You don't have to do that." She felt helpless and silly. "I can handle a 2-block walk." "I can use the exercise. I've been sitting too much lately." He nodded as if to say, "Get going." With a begrudging acceptance, she began walking. He kept his strides measured, setting a more balanced pace. She wasn't a fan of small talk, but meteor topics had become explosive. Sooner, the carnival, the Young investigation, and, God help her, the sex they'd had just 6 days ago. Refusing to stoop to the weather or favorite movies, she chose the lesser of the evils. "How goes your investigation into the Young case? I've been keeping up with it through the papers." "It's slow. We're still looking at her car and the man who got into it before she vanished." "You'd think with all the cameras and people in this area that someone would have seen something." "Yeah, but I'm starting to think our killer had his entire agenda well planned." "Even the best killers leave clues." "So I've heard." They reached an intersection and he took her elbow in hand. 3 cars passed. When the road was clear, they crossed the street. Taking her elbow was a protective, unnecessary, and kind gesture she appreciated. "The organized killers often leave clues so small they are almost invisible," she said. "If that's true, then this guy is very, very organized." She'd never heard the faintest hint of self-doubt from Rockoff, and even now it wasn't so much that she heard the doubt, she simply felt the doubt. If she sat in Madame Devine's chair right now, she'd have said he had a strong aura and he was destined for great things. "You'll find the killer, Detective. You're a clever one." He grinned. Was that a compliment, Counselor? "I give credit where credit is due." He slid his hand into his pocket. "Let's hope I'm that clever. This guy needs to be found." Again, she sensed the fear that another victim would die before he could find his killer. But to ask a question so personal meant opening a door she did not wish to open, and so they walked in silence. When they reached her office, she faced him. "Here I am, home sweet home." He glanced at the 3-story brick townhouse with its wrought iron front rail, stone planter filled with red geraniums, and dark lacquer front door sporting the pineapple head door knocker. "Fancy digs, Counselor." "Don't be fooled by the old-world charm. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning are in need of an overhaul, and I've got a couple of basement pipes that like to freeze in the winter." What had prompted this candor? He tested the railing's sturdiness with a sound shake. "It still had to cost you a fortune." "I'll let you in on a secret." It was a small, safe secret. I got the place in a bankruptcy sale a couple of years ago. I redid the first floor, electric and plumbing, but the upper floors are a disaster. I wouldn't dare show them to you." Humor and interest sparked in his gaze. "So Wellington and James is a facade?" No truer words had been spoken. "One day I'll have the place finished." "You could probably flip the building and make a good bit of money." "A second mortgage financed the renovation. Seemed like a good move until the bottom dropped out of the real estate market and landed me upside down in the mortgage. I can't sell, but as long as I keep working, I'll be fine. The market will catch back up." And it would, just as the work would increase. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening and then leaned toward her. "Why not just dip into the trust fund to finance the renovations?" That made her laugh. "No trust fund, detective. It's just me with a big stick holding off the wolves." "Alone. It's the way it's always been." "Doesn't have to be." She ignored the subtext. "It's less complicated that way." "No tangles." Tangles, the word of warning she'd used before they'd made love the last time. "Right." "Being alone doesn't bother you?" Lately it did. Too many nights she'd lain awake wishing she could roll over into his strong embrace, but the cards didn't bode well for the master at bending rules and the Boy Scout. "It's nothing I can't handle." He pulled off his glasses, revealing a direct, clear gaze. "I'd like to see you again." "I would dearly love a few hours alone with you." Her voice was barely a whisper, and she was careful not to lean toward him, fearful someone would notice. "But I'm going to have to take a rain check. I barely have time to sleep." He curled and uncurled his fingers as if resisting the urge to touch her. "When?" "Soon." "Very soon." Not a question, but a statement. "I can't make promises." With an impatient jab, he shoved his glasses in his breast pocket. "Charlotte, stop worrying and just let this unfold." "Into what?" He took her hand in his and rubbed his thumb against her palm. "Isn't that the fun of it? Not knowing?" "I like being in control." "So I've noticed." Memories of her most brazen bedroom moves warmed her face. Smiling, he gave her hand a gentle squeeze and then released it. "We'll work on that." "Mighty confident, detective." "I try." He glanced around as if scanning the streets for trouble. "Be careful. Lonnie doesn't strike me as a quitter." She straightened, remembering they were in public. "I'll keep that in mind." Rockoff turned and strode down the street, leaving her to wonder why she was so afraid of the man. On Mondays, Dr. Maya Jones went running at the local high school track, raced home to shower and change. Then she grabbed a coffee and bagel at Just Java, where she caught up with friends. By 3, she'd be at the school teaching class. She was so predictable, as her on-again, off-again lover had once said, but she found comfort in structure and routine, and had long ago decided to do what she pleased. She glanced at her sports watch as she strolled into the coffee shop. The scent of coffee mingled with freshly baked pastries flavored with cinnamon. Warm and inviting, this place always made her happy. Mothers brought their children here. Writers read from their latest works. Business was conducted. This was a good place. And to think a killer had invaded the neighborhood just days ago. She shuddered. There was always someone to spread poison and evil. She strolled up to the counter, glanced at the glass jar filled with biscotti, the bin of mints, and the We Accept Tips cup. A young teen boy with shoulder-length blonde hair, wearing a Georgetown t-shirt and jeans, moved up to the register. "How's it going, Joey?" She dug her change purse from her pocket. "All's well, Maya. You want the regular? Latte and sugar cookie, seeing as it is Friday." She laughed. "Yes." The kid stared at her with a clear, direct gaze, and she had liked him from the start. "So how go your classes?" He shrugged as he held a pitcher of milk up to the steamer. "Can't complain. Calculus blows, but I'm managing." "I know tutors if you need help." "So far, I don't need the cavalry, but I'll let you know if I do." Joey finished her latte, set a cookie on a plate, and rang her up. Seconds later, she was sitting at a small round table by the large picture window that overlooked the wharf. Drooping yellow crime scene tape still cordoned off the area. She'd read about the murder in the paper. There'd been suggestions it was related to the occult, but details had been sketchy. Likely it was some ignorant kid who didn't even know how to spell devil. She sipped her coffee. A couple passed by her table. They were laughing. Some days she wondered what it would be like to experience pure happiness, or what it would be like to accept a man's smile at face value without searching for the kernels of evil, or what it would be like to kiss a man and not fear he'd steal her heart. This time, when she raised the cup to her lips, the tension in her fingers threatened to crack the cup. Carefully, she set it down next to the uneaten cookie.
Hey, welcome again.
She glanced up into Katrina's face. Good afternoon. Her smile brightened as she wiped down a table.
So, how does that cookie taste?
Good and fattening.
Please, you run so much you'll never gain weight.
You should have seen me 40 pounds ago.
Really?
Really.
You look stunning.
Thanks. Lots of blood, sweat, and tears. Her on-again, off-again had told her she'd looked a little puffy the other day. Katrina moved on to the next table, leaving Maya to her cookie, her latte, and her book, which she dug out of her worn backpack. Today, she was giving kids a test, so there were no lessons to plan. When a man sat at the table beside her, she was only vaguely aware of him. When he scooted his chair, the sound dragged her gaze upward. She'd seen him here before. He was quiet, kept to himself, a reader, all traits she shared. As she lowered her gaze, she noted the book he was reading, Salem's Lost. She had been reading it the other day. It was a historical biography of a woman accused of witchcraft in the 17th century. So, how do you like Salem's Lost? She said. He carefully marked his place before he glanced up. I'm not buying the writer's hypothesis. I mean, really, bacteria caused mass hysteria that led to the witch trials? It's a theory that has been debated a few times. She relaxed back in her seat. Not many folks get into the history of Salem. There's a lot to be learned from history. He broke a piece off his muffin as if he were going to eat it. But in this case, I think the writer has it wrong. Really? He didn't let his gaze linger on her too long. Bacteria in the bread did not make the town lynch those women. It was fear and greed. Honestly, I agree with you, but it never hurts to explore new theories. On reflex, she pushed up her sleeves to her elbows. However, the author provides some great historical detail. She tucked a strand behind her ear and studied him closely for the first time. She liked what she saw. Mind if I join you? He scooted his chair back and held out an open-faced palm in invitation. The company would be nice. She picked up her cup and took the seat across from him. I've seen you here before. I like this place. Very homey. He glanced out the window toward the wharf. You hear about what happened there? I did. Terrible. I hope the cops catch the nuts soon. She extended her hand, and the silver bracelets jingled on her slim wrist. I'm Maya Jones. He took her hand. I'm Hunter Thompson. His hand was warm and soft. Very pleased to meet you, Hunter. They spent the next half hour talking and laughing, and for the first time in too long, she felt as if the universe had tossed her a lucky break. Her watch beeped, and she glanced down at the time. I've got to go, Hunter. This has been great, but I've got to teach my class. He checked his own watch. I need to get going, too. Maybe we can grab a cup of coffee again? I'd like that. Can I walk you to your car? Sure. They rose, and he held the front door for her. So charming, so old-fashioned, so very nice. They strolled down the street. I have a book I think you'll like to read, Hunter said. What's that? It's a history of this area. Fascinating stuff. If you've got a quick sec, I'll pull it out of my trunk. She checked her watch. The side trip would make her late for class. She hesitated. And so what if it did? How many times had she waited on again, off again, or the kids in her class? Sure. She followed him down a side alley toward a Lincoln. He pulled keys from his pocket and clicked the lock open. As he leaned over and rummaged through piles of books, she caught his scent. Soap and soft aftershave. Nice. Normal. Here it is, he said. She leaned forward a fraction, and in that second felt the prick of a needle in the side of her neck. Her vision blurred almost immediately, and her legs buckled. Hunter grabbed her and quickly laid her in the trunk of his car on the books. That was almost too easy. You are so predictable, Maya. As her vision grew hazier and darker, her last image was of Hunter gazing at her with searing hate. Chapter 14. Monday, October 25th, 6:55 p.m. Charlotte had scored a clear victory today in court. Innocent. Her client had been released from jail and now was free to get on with her life. The press for Wellington and James had been outstanding. Life was looking up. So why did life feel so out of control? Why, in the light of so many successes, did she see only failure? Because you are too tired and you need a break. Because you are on this case too long and you can't just let go. She set aside the reports on her new client prospects and rose from her living room couch. Barefooted, she changed from her suit into gym shorts and an old t-shirt. This was her go-to comfort outfit that made her feel like herself and one that she'd never wear in public. In the kitchen, she set a copper tea kettle on the stove and turned on the gas burner. She wondered what Sooner was doing now. Where was she going to sleep when she left the carnival? The tea kettle blew. She shut off the gas flame, poured hot water into a black and gray mug, and set the kettle on a cool burner. Moving into the living room, she stared at the mountain range of brown boxes. The movers would be here on Friday. She'd signed the closing papers, taken the buyer's check, and finalized the lease agreement on the modest 2-bedroom apartment. In 2 days, the consignment store representative would arrive, and she'd chosen what she wanted to sell and what she wanted to keep. It was all necessary. All had to happen. Yet it was deeply unsettling. She'd moved around so much as a kid, and she'd hated it. There'd been no real school to attend, no long-term friendships. Everything had been temporary. Had Sooner hated the endless moving? Had the girl longed for a permanent place? Or was she part gypsy like her grandmother? The movers had packed most of her belongings, but she'd asked them to leave the back closet to her. She'd yet to tackle the task, because all that stuff belonged to Grace Wells, stuff she should have pitched a long time ago. Steam rose from the mug. You go out of your way to forget, and yet you save all the evidence. Hell, you couldn't even bring yourself to leave Alexandria. She opened the closet, turned the light on, and set the mug on a shelf before kneeling beside a box marked high school. Carefully, she removed the lid. On top was the white cap and gown she'd worn at graduation. She pulled out the hat and flicked the gold tassel. She'd been 7th in her class. Though her grade point average had been the highest senior year, the valedictorian was selected on the 4-year average. It didn't matter that she'd come to the party late, or that she was smarter than Nan Graham. All that mattered was that she didn't have a 4-year record to average. Below the gown was a collection of school newspapers. She'd wanted to write for the Jefferson Journal, but working 30 hours a week at the pizza place and school had eaten all her time. Charlotte closed the box and set it in the living room inside a sturdier moving box. She sealed the box and marked it with the word storage. She stared at the bold black lettering, her pen hovering. Why couldn't she just let go? Wasn't everybody better off if she let sleeping dogs lie? Shit. She scratched it out and then wrote trash. Afraid she'd overthink it, she recapped the pen and returned to the closet. The next few boxes were much the same. Bits and pieces of a past she'd never been able to release. Like the first box, she marked each as trash. The last and most battered box was shoved in the back corner. This was the carnival box that held the memories of her mother, Mariah, and Sooner. Her hands trembled when she opened this box. Her first image was of an old carnival program. It featured Madame Devine on the front. The image was not her mother's, hers, or Mariah's. The photo was of a woman who'd sat in the tent long before them. Her mother had wanted Grady to change the picture, but he'd refused. One night they'd gotten drunk and begun to fight. Her mother had brought the picture up, and he told her the woman in the picture had been a lover whom he'd adored more than his own life, but she'd left him for a rich man. Under the program, there was a photo of Grace in costume. She couldn't have been more than 16, but there she sat, trying to look into the camera as if she had a lifetime of sophistication and experience behind her. She traced the outline of the girl's rounded face. I look like I'm 12. What the hell kind of man would put a kid like that to work? She knew exactly what kind of man. A manipulator, a charmer, a man who used girls. She dug deeper and found the pictures she tried to forget. They were of 2 young girls. One who looked awkward and scared, the other who looked like she owned the world. Sisters. And until that last fall, they'd been closer to each other than anyone else in the world. That last fall had changed everything. Sooner had been born, and Mariah had died. A barely tolerable world had become unbearable. She traced Mariah's face, which was so much like Sooner's. Mariah, the girl doesn't know any different kind of life. She doesn't know it can be better. And Grady will see to it that she never does know different. So what are you gonna do, Grace? Bitch and complain, cut and run, or stand and fight? She checked her watch. The carnival would be open for another hour. Time enough to visit. He stared at the woman Maya lying on the floor. Her eyes were shut and her mouth slack-jawed. With a cattle prod, he poked her in the chest. She didn't move. He pinched her arm, hard. She didn't respond. Her breathing was so shallow and quiet, he thought for a moment she'd stopped breathing. He leaned close and pressed his ear to her chest. Under the fabric, he felt the faint but steady beat of her heart. She was alive. He'd overdosed her. He thought he'd not put enough in the syringe, and fearing she'd call out in public, he'd injected her a second time. Now he could see that he'd overdone it. She'd not awaken for another day at best. As much as he wanted to begin the Inquisition now, it would have to wait. Killing her now wouldn't be right. He needed the confession before God granted him the right to take her life. He kissed her on the lips. They were soft and supple. He let his hand slide to her breast, and he massaged the soft mound, and then pinched and twisted her nipple. She moaned, and a faint line appeared on her forehead. Despite the drug, she felt the pain. He got hard. He squeezed again and again. She moaned. His erection pulsed. Even asleep, you have power over me. He moved to the edge of the gurney and grabbed fistfuls of her fabric skirt and dragged the hem up to her waist. He took a moment to stare at her long, smooth legs. He grabbed a hold of her ankles and pushed them wider apart. She lay limp, waiting for him, and already he found the lack of challenge deflating. Frustrated, he grabbed the folds of her blouse and ripped it. Buttons popped. He then pulled a switchblade from his pocket and sliced the center of her bra, which snapped open and freed her full breasts. He traced her nipple with the tip. When she didn't react, he sliced a little deeper into the areola. She whimpered, and blood oozed from the cut. His excitement returned. Of course, he'd not kill her now, but perhaps he could find something interesting to fill the time. He moved to a table where he kept several of his toys. Rummaging through the devices, he selected a thick, hard rubber shaft. He cut her panties free and tossed them on the floor. You'll be sorry you ever tempted me, witch. He drove the shaft into her with so much force, a tear ran down her cheek. The night air had grown cool when Charlotte arrived at the carnival. The same familiar sense greeted her as it had the other night, but this time she'd been prepared for the memory triggers, and she'd not allowed herself to go back. Digging her hands in the pockets of her suede jacket, she moved through the dwindling crowds toward Sooner's tent. She hesitated at the flap, wondering if this was really what she wanted. Ignoring the warnings, she pushed open the flap and moved into the dimly lit room. A soft light glowed in the corner, and hidden speakers played a quiet, soothing tune. Incense burned. Sooner sat at her table, her gaze turned down onto tarot cards arranged in the Celtic cross pattern. So you've come back to offer me more advice? Charlotte moved across carpeted floor and took the seat in front of Sooner. Lavender incense burned and added a tang to the air. I didn't see a line, so I thought I'd better jump at the chance. Traffic is always slow on Mondays. She remembered. She smoothed her hands over her jeans. I've never sat on this side of the table before. Sooner slowly gathered her cards. All those years of readings, and you never had one. No, I didn't have any interest. She tried not to marvel at the girl's resemblance to Mariah. What's the old saying? The cobbler's wife has no shoes? Sooner shuffled the cards and laid them out on the table between them. Why don't you let me read for you? It's the very least. I can tell what you're going to see. Sooner arched a brow. She'd chosen just the right shade of purple and brown eyeshadow to make her green eyes pop and even mesmerize. Oh, really? What do I see? Work, more work, a few thousand bills, more work. Sooner studied her a beat and then lowered her gaze to the cards. She tapped a card featuring a heart with 3 swords driven through the middle. Sorrow. You're not a happy woman, Charlotte Wellington. What tipped you off? The mention of nonstop work or a few thousand bills? Sooner shook her head. It goes beyond that. This sadness runs deep. Charlotte sat back in her chair. She folded her arms over her chest, nearly unfolded them, but didn't, fearing she'd appear jittery or nervous. You know I have a past with Grady, and if you've grown up with him, then you know it wasn't a lot of chuckles. Sooner stared at her. He's a prickly, possessive old man, but he has his good points. I take it you haven't told him you're leaving? No. Tell him, and then we'll chat about his good points. The girl smoothed her flat palms over the silken tablecloth. What was it like when you left him? Not pretty. Tell me. I'm not sure how this turned into a counseling session. She did unfold her arms this time and shifted her position in her chair. You came to me. There must be a reason. I came here to talk about you and your future, not me. I'm not nearly as interesting as you. I find you curious. Why? You lived this life, but you didn't let it eat you alive as it has so many. You got out. I'm getting out. I have a lot to learn from you, Aunt Charlotte. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest thing I ever did. But I can help make it easier for you. Sooner ignored the statement. I did a little poking around the carnival. You triggered memories with the older guys the other night when you paid us a visit. I thought I might. Grady was married to your mother? Yes. What happened to her? She died when I was 13. That's how my sister and I got the gig in this tent. She'd done it before us. Sooner glanced at the next card. The devil. You were seduced by a man and then by the material world. A smile, not so happy, tipped the edge of her mouth. Guilty on both counts, hence the thousands of bills. How did your mother die? She suffered a stroke. She drew in a long, slow breath and then released it slowly. At least you had her for 13 years. My mother ran off and died right after I was born. Charlotte sat very still for a long moment. What has Grady told you about her? He doesn't like to talk about Mariah, but on my 13th birthday I kept pushing. Finally he got angry and told me she ran off. He said she wasn't right in the head. She said a lot of crazy things before she took off. She wasn't crazy. She was young and she was scared, but she wasn't crazy. She pulled a picture from her pocket and laid it over the tarot cards. That's a picture of Mariah and me. We were about 15 and 16. A lump formed in her throat, and she swallowed to keep her voice even. We were sisters and best friends. Sooner's body went very still. She carefully picked it up. A frown furrowed her brow as she studied the image. Mariah looks like me. And she looked like our mother. You look a lot like our mother. I nearly stumbled when I first saw you in court. Sooner traced her face. What happened the night she drowned? She had a date, but she never said a word about leaving. Grady sent out search parties for her. We were all worried. Grady told me they found her by the lake. Where was the carnival then? Here. It was very different then. More woods, less houses. The carnival had 2 more nights to go before he wrapped and broke for the winter. Sooner stared at Mariah's image. I was supposed to work the tent that night, but I was tired, so Mariah volunteered. I tried to wait up for her, but I must have dozed off. I woke up about 3 in the morning. No reason to tell the girl that she'd been awoken by a nightmare filled with Mariah's screams, or that she'd heard those same screams in recent dreams. I got scared and went to Grady. I've never seen a picture of her before. Charlotte tried to ease the tension in her chest with a deep breath. Grady never told you about Mariah? No. She traced Mariah's face. Did she love me? Her voice was a bare whisper. Did my mother love me? Tears choked Charlotte's throat, and she couldn't manage a single word for several moments. Finally, she nodded. She loved you very much. She wanted the world for you. Then why did she leave? She was so young and so afraid. The explanation sounded paltry. I'm so sorry it couldn't have been different. Sooner stiffened. But it wasn't, was it? No. Charlotte straightened. I want to help. Why? Why do you care? Because we are flesh and blood, all the family the other has. The young woman's eyes glistened with anger and fear. Maybe Mariah lied to you. Maybe she'd been planning to leave for a long time. As kids, Mariah had stretched the truth, but she'd never lied to Grace. No, she didn't lie to me. Whatever. She set the picture down on the table. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I've got to wrap it up for the night. I don't want to dig into an old wound. Maybe you should. Maybe I should. Like I said, I don't want to. Just back off. Leave my tent. The last words were loud and tinged with so much anger. Charlotte knew enough about people to know when she could get through and when she couldn't, and right now there was no talking to Sooner. Okay. She left the girl sitting at her desk, her gaze cast on the photo. As she walked through the carnival and listened to the organ music and the laughter, her anger grew. She checked her watch. The carnival would be closing for the night soon, which meant that Grady was in his trailer getting ready for the final walkthrough of the night. In long, even strides, she crossed the grounds to the black trailer that had been her home when she and her mother had first moved in with him. Without knocking, she tried the door handle. It was locked. More frustrated and angry than she'd been in years, she pounded her fist until it hurt. "Hold your damn horses!" Grady's gravelly voice cut through the metal door like a razor. "Shit! Somebody better be fucking bleeding." A little breathless, she stepped back. When he opened the door, his anger morphed to curiosity. Behind him, she could see the glow of a television set that he'd turned down. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and hot dogs wafted out of the room. "You're about the last person I figured I'd see here." "I swear to God, Grady, if I had a bat, I'd knock you senseless." Her statement made him laugh. "So the cold and level Charlotte Wellington is getting closer and closer to her roots every day. You can take the girl out of the carnival, but you can't take the carny out of the girl." "Why did you tell Sooner that her mother abandoned her?" The humor vanished from his gaze. "How do you know what I told Sooner?" "I just went to see her." "I thought you were done with this place. I thought we wasn't good enough for you." His attempts to make her feel guilty were a miserable effort compared to what she'd heaped on herself over the years. "I found pictures of Mariah and me. I thought she might like to have them. Seeing the pictures prompted her to tell me about her mother's abandonment." Grady's expression hardened. "You and Mariah were so much alike, always wanting more. You wanted school, and she wanted a man to save her. She couldn't keep her legs closed for more than a few weeks." "She was just a kid, and she drowned. Did you ever wonder what happened to her?" "Fucking right, I wondered." Energy rushed out of him like a tidal wave, leaving him drained and pale. "It was only a matter of time before that girl came to a bad end. She wouldn't listen to good reason." "Good reason, or your hard-ass rules and regulations?" He shrugged. "One and the same." She pointed a shaking index finger at him. "You had no right to tell Sooner her mother abandoned her. She believes her mother did not love her." "If a mama had loved her, she'd have stayed close to home." Tears burned in her eyes. "Home or you?" "One and the same." Acceptance seeped into her bones. "I think you're right, Grady. You can't take the carny out of the girl." She leaned toward him, her voice low and determined. "Carnies are fighters at heart, and we can be dangerous. And I can promise you, if you do not treat Sooner right, I will track you down and make you pay." His face paled only a fraction. "What the hell could you do to me?" "I'm not a kid anymore, and I swear I will crush you, old man. I will crush you." She turned and left the carnival. In her car, the adrenaline had ebbed from her muscles, and her body began to shake. She tipped her head back and let the tears pool in her eyes and fall down her cheeks. All those years ago, she'd left the carnival because Grady had sworn Sooner would end up with a real family, and the bastard had lied. She pounded the steering wheel. "What the hell kind of angle are you working, old man? You never do anything without a reason." The air in the car grew hot and stale, forcing her to turn the key in the ignition so she could roll down the windows. She'd been too young and afraid when Mariah had died to ask many questions, and then when she left the carnival, she'd been too busy running from her past to dare think about it. However, her days of running were over. She wanted to know what happened to Mariah, and fuck Grady, the past, and whoever didn't approve of her. Someone tapped on her window. "Charlotte?" Hearing her name had her turning. There stood Levi with a woman and 2 young children, his family, she presumed. Forcing a smile, she swiped her cheeks and got out of the car. "Levi, what brings you here?" "Brought the family," he said, He glanced fondly at a thin brunette standing beside him. "This is Marcia, my wife." Charlotte extended her hand. "Nice to meet you." Marcia took her hand, and Charlotte immediately sensed nerves and worry. Small, petite, she was conservatively dressed. Her only bit of jewelry was an angel necklace, hardly the type she'd have paired with the supercharged Levi.
"Nice to meet you. These are our children, Bailey and Jefferson."
The little girl, Bailey, was an 8-year-old version of her mother, and 6-year-old Jefferson had his dad's build but his mother's nervous energy.
"Hey, guys," Charlotte said. "Did you have fun at the fair tonight?"
Both kids smiled and dutifully nodded. "They're worn out," Levi said. "We got a late start this evening because of my work, but we've been here for a couple of hours. I had to bring them. I loved this place." She flashed to the moment she'd been pounding on Grady's trailer door. "There is a lot to see and do here. Did you kids try the Ferris wheel?" "They loved it," Levi said. Charlotte wondered if his family had the ability to answer for themselves. "Great." "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "Just taking a break." She glanced up and saw Grady moving toward them. She held her ground and waited as he approached. "You all are in for a treat. This is Grady Tate, the owner of the carnival." Grady hesitated as if surprised she'd held her ground. "Howdy, folks." He smiled at each, his gaze pausing on Marcia Kane for a split second. "Ms. Wellington giving you the rundown on the carnival?" Confusion sparked in Levi's gaze. "You two know each other?" She locked gazes with Grady. No more running. No more lies. "I used to work for this carnival when I was a teenager. Grady was my boss. Grady, this is Levi Kane. He's a prosecutor in Alexandria." Grady nodded, his smile bright but disingenuous. "Glad you could visit my show." "We love the carnival," he said. He draped his arm around his wife's shoulders. Her smile was quick but stiff. Levi shook his head. "Charlotte, you worked in a place like this? I don't believe it." All these years of hiding, and now she'd blown open the door to her past. "Believe it or not, I worked as the carnival psychic." "Really? When was all this?" "In high school." "She was one of the best," Grady said. "One of the best." Levi's gaze sparked with laughter. "There are times in court when I wondered if you weren't part sorceress." Her laugh was humorless. "Madame Divine sees all." He shook his head. "So did you read palms and tarot cards?" "The whole deal. Even read tea leaves at one point." This was going to be all over the courthouse by Monday. So be it. Let the world know her past was a mess. "Well, you learn something new every day." "I was just trying to tempt Ms. Wellington to stay a little longer," Grady said. "Sorry, big day tomorrow." She checked her watch. "It's getting late and I've got a mountain of work to do." "I'll be burning the midnight oil too," Levi said. "Well, nice seeing you." She got into her BMW. With a final wave to Levi and his family, she drove off, knowing she had to figure out what really had happened to Mariah. Grady poured a healthy dose of whiskey into his half-full cup of coffee. He took several large gulps before the whiskey took a little edge off his anger. He moved to a collection of newspaper articles and flipped to one featuring a large picture of Charlotte. The headline read, "Local attorney shot, expected to recover." "Who the fuck do you think you are?" he said to the professional headshot the paper had used with the article. "You were a fucking nobody when I married that mother of yours. Living in motels, no sense of discipline. You were headed to a life of shit." He took another gulp. "I warned Mariah that her behavior was going to get her in trouble. I warned her, and in the end, she got what she deserved. I fucking came to you hat in hand, and you've been nothing but a bitch." He pressed the mug to his temple and closed his eyes. Sudden hot tears pooled under the lids. "Nothing but a bitch." Checking his watch, he slammed down the glass and disappeared into the night. Maya woke to the heavy scent of urine and the coppery aroma of blood. A tiny sphere of light dripped from an overhead bulb that rocked and swayed over her head. Confused, she stared at the light, trying to clear the haze from her brain. Where was she? How had she gotten here? She moistened her lips and tried to roll on her side, but pain shot through her body like a lightning bolt cutting through bone and muscle. Oh, God! Had it been an accident? Tears pooling in her eyes, she relaxed back and took deep, even breaths. Think! Remember! And through the darkness and fog, her mind tripped back to the coffee shop, the new man, and the needle and the crushing fear. He drugged her and tossed her in the trunk of his car. Moaning her fear and frustration, she rolled her head from side to side. How could she have been so stupid? How many times had she told her students to be careful and not trust strangers? Carefully, she pried her eyes open, squinted past the light above, and focused on her surroundings. She craned her head to the right and saw a simple workbench with everyday tools: hammer, screwdriver, drill. Down here, the objects she'd never thought twice about took on a whole new and menacing meaning. The rattle of keys to the right caught her attention, and she spotted a figure moving toward a workbench. He set his keys on the bench, removed a rubber apron from a peg, and slipped it over his head. As he tied the strings at the base of his back, he turned toward her. "You're lucky I don't have a lot of time." "Why?" He grabbed a fistful of her hair. "Because there are so many others I have yet to kill." "I don't understand." "Sure you do. You all talk to each other. I know you do." He shoved out a frustrated sigh. "But nothing has happened that I cannot fix." "Fix what?" "It doesn't matter. It's time." Fear sharpened her senses. "Time for what?" "Your confession." Maya stared into dark, clear eyes that looked so sane. She'd always made it a policy not to open herself to strangers. She'd heard enough horror stories, but he seemed like such a good guy, normal, grounded. She turned her head away from his gaze. "Where am I?" "My special place. It's where I do my work." "Work? What kind of work?" "God's work. Evil shouldn't be so calm and attractive. It should be angry and hideous." Her body ached so much. Her insides felt like they were on fire. "Oh, God, what did you do to me?" She tugged against the restraint securing her hands above her head. His expression hardened. "How dare you call on his name?" "What?" He leaned over the table and pressed his lips right next to her ear. "People like you don't have the right to call to God." "People like me?" "Logic. Try to reach him. Maybe he's made a mistake." "What kind of people are you talking about?" "Witches. Those that have been sent by the Dark Prince to destroy all that is good." Hysteria bubbled. "What are you talking about? I'm a history teacher. I barely date. I pay my taxes. I have a cat. I've never missed a mortgage payment." "And you teach the dark arts." He unlocked something under her, which enabled him to move the gurney toward a wall. He butted the head against a big sink. "I teach history." "Of witches?" He reached behind her and turned on a faucet. Immediately, water rushed in the sink behind her head and pooled and gathered. "I talk about the history of Salem, of the women who were persecuted." God, how many facts did she have to throw at this man to reach him? "Witches." "Not witches! Good women!" She all but screamed the last words. "You say they were good women. But after we've finished here tonight, I'd wager you will see it all very differently." "What the hell are you going to do to me?" Her heart hammered so hard in her chest, she truly thought it would burst through her ribs. He carefully rolled up his sleeve, and then slid his hands into gloves. "Let's find out right now." Her brain scrambled to keep him talking. If he were talking, he wouldn't be doing what he was going to do. Keep him talking. "Who are you?" "I'm a witch hunter. I find women like you and expose them for the evil they are." "I'm not evil." "Yes, you are." He pushed another something underneath her, and this time the gurney didn't roll, but inclined. He tilted the edge back, forcing her head to dip. She clenched her fingers into fists, and water from the sink rushed around her head and then her cheek. The water teased her mouth, and then the end of her nose. Panicking, she closed her eyes and sucked in a deep breath just as her head went below the surface of the water. Her heart pounded in her ears as she struggled not to lose her cool and hold her breath. She'd been a swimmer in college. Once, she'd swum the length of the pool underwater. How long had that taken? 30 seconds? A minute?
She counted. 1, 2, 3. Her heart pounded faster and faster. The jugular in her neck throbbed. She tightened her fingers into fists as if she were holding on to an invisible ledge. A rush of noise flooded her ears as her body begged for air. And when her lungs could be denied no longer, she opened her mouth and on reflex inhaled. Water rushed into her mouth and lungs. Her eyes popped open, and through the inches of water separating her from life, she saw his face. He studied her features closely. No humor, no joy, just watching. She tried to cough and gag, but it drew more water into her lungs. Her heart skipped a beat. Her vision blurred and then turned gray. She could only think that this was a foolish way to die. So stupid. She'd always been so careful. And then the blackness came, and her hold on life slipped. Maya drifted toward death. Her next impression was of sucking in a lungful of air. She lay on her side, and someone was patting her on the back. Water drained from her mouth. She breathed in long, deep breaths and blinked. She was alive. She was alive. When the coughing ended, she rolled on her back, savoring a sense of relief that she'd never known before. Someone had stopped this madman and saved her. Saved her! She blinked and focused, ready to thank her savior. But when her gaze sharpened, she didn't see a white knight. She saw the hunter, whose blue eyes still held a mixture of curiosity and determination. The elation vanished as quick as a balloon pricked by a sharp needle. "Why?" she whispered. Her throat felt raw and her chest ached. She suspected she had a broken rib because each breath now hurt. He'd drowned her, and then he'd brought her back to life. She pictured him pumping on her chest and then blowing air into her lungs, performing CPR until he'd forced the air and life back in her. "Are you evil? Are you a witch?" he said. "What? I don't understand." "Are you a witch?" He wanted a confession, but as much as she wanted to give him one to make this nightmare end, she sensed if she told him, he'd kill her. And she knew, despite the horrors of this room, she wanted to live. "I am not a witch." He shook his head. The strong ones never admit to the evil at first. He released the knob on the gurney again. But in the end, they all do confess. Terror burned through her body. She glanced over at her shoulder, and he slowly tipped her toward the water. "I am not a witch. I am good. I don't Rushing water into her mouth cut off the last of her words. Chapter 15. Tuesday, October 26th, 10 a.m. Rockoff was called into court for a pretrial hearing, but the prosecution and defense had settled on a plea agreement. He hated the time spent in courthouses waiting to testify and doubted he'd ever fully accept it. Today, however, the summons to court had not bothered him as much because he'd half expected to see Charlotte. The White case was finished, but she was in the courthouse often enough that a chance meeting was possible. He rubbed the back of his neck, wondering when he'd begun anticipating seeing Charlotte, not just in bed, but also in public. They'd been intimate a half-dozen times, and he'd learned things about her he suspected few knew. He knew makeup hid freckles on her nose, knew her scent and the brand of her silk undergarments, knew which touches made her coo. But beyond that, he knew little more than her public profile. As he moved down the courthouse steps toward his car, the dark edges of his black suit flapping in the breeze, the cell in his pocket vibrated. He dug it out and paused on the sidewalk. "Rockoff." "I didn't think I'd get you." "Sinclair, they released me. Plea agreement." "This the stabbing on Van Dorn?" "Yeah." "What was the deal?" "Manslaughter, 10 years. She snorted. "I don't agree, but no one asked me." He laughed. "Me either." Papers rustled in the background. "So now maybe we can get some real work done." Would be a welcome change. He wanted to forget about the stabbing on Van Dorn, which in his mind was premeditated murder, and he wanted to forget about Charlotte. "What do you have?" "I have a line on another one of Diane Young's more active clients." They'd spent the last week slowly going through the list. Diane Young had hundreds of clients, but most were out of state. They decided to narrow the field by interviewing anyone in a 50-mile radius.
That had shrunk the list to 30, and so far members of the homicide team had talked to 28 of those. The remaining 2 had taken more legwork to find. Most had been infrequent customers who'd hired Diane on a lark or for pure entertainment. A handful were hardcore believers in her psychic talents and consulted her on everything from new jobs, lovers, or trivial crap such as the best time to take out the trash. Sad cases as far as he was concerned. "Who did you find?" "Victor Ingram." He put on his sunglasses and, glancing both ways for traffic, crossed to his black cruiser. "He's the one that did time for robbery?" "One and the same. He's been a hard one to track down, but he did check in with his parole officer today. He was sick, he said. Wasn't real forthcoming about what made him sick, but he's back at work today." He slid behind the wheel of his car. The sun had warmed the leather, and the heat eased his tense back. Too many nights at his desk and not enough exercise took its toll on him. In his 20s, he never had aches and pains. Now he did. He still blamed it on college rugby, not age. "Where is he now?" "Works at a garage in Leesburg." He fired up the engine. "I'll be by the offices in 15 minutes. We can head out there now." "Roger that, boss." He hung up, pulled into traffic, and wove through the city streets. The drive from the courthouse to the police station took 20 minutes. When he pulled up, Sinclair was waiting. She slid into the passenger side and rubbed her hands together. "Winter is on its way." "It's 65 degrees, hardly a cold snap." She shrugged. "The cold gets to me more these days." "You shouldn't have taken those 2 weeks in Florida. They spoiled you." Sinclair shrugged. "I could get used to a life in the tropics on a beach easily." He chuckled. "You'd go insane, and you know it." "Maybe, eventually, but I'd sure love to see how long it would take for the good life to bug me." 1 month, max." "You have little faith." "You're type A, Sinclair. You don't rest well." He maneuvered into traffic, which fed into the Beltway, the main highway artery around the Washington, District of Columbia metro area. The westward drive to Leesburg took 40 minutes, which in the District of Columbia time was great. Rush hour traffic, weather, or a fender bender could easily double or triple the drive. They found Randall's garage on Route 7 on the outskirts of Leesburg near a strip mall. Randall's was a 1-story brick building with 2 garage bays, an office with a large picture window, and a couple of gas pumps out front. At one point the brick had been painted white, but time and weather had dulled the gloss and chipped the finish. A fluorescent sign in the picture window blinked Randall's Garage in bright orange. Rockoff parked on the side of the building next to a row of cars that appeared to be in the queue for service. The detectives got out of the car and walked to the front office, where they found a tall, slim man behind the register. Of Middle Eastern descent, the man had ink-black hair graying at the temples, and his shoulders had hunched in a pronounced stoop, as if he'd spent a lifetime bent over a car engine. When the detectives entered, the man glanced up, his gaze turning from curious to suspicious. "May I help you?" Perfect grammar blended with a thick accent, suggesting he had been in this country many years, but had spent a good bit of his early life overseas. Rockoff removed his badge from the breast pocket of his suit. "My name is Detective Daniel Rockoff. I'm with the Alexandria Police." Sensing the man's anxiety, he avoided using homicide department. When people realized he was investigating a murder, they immediately tensed. "This is my partner, Detective Jennifer Sinclair." Sinclair pulled out her badge and offered a fleeting smile. Warm and fuzzy was not her forte, and a lukewarm smile was a good effort for Sinclair. "Hello?" The man nodded. "And you are?" Rockoff tucked his badge back in his pocket. "I am Mr. Randall. This is my garage." Apprehension rippled through the man's body, but Rockoff didn't necessarily see that as a sign of guilt. This man was clearly from a country where a visit from the police could mean real trouble. How many times had his own grandmother hesitated around police? "We're here to speak to an employee of yours, a Mr. Victor Ingram." Mr. Randall expelled a small breath. "He is a mechanic. Is he in trouble?" "No, sir. We just want to ask him a few questions. Routine." Mr. Randall pulled a rag from his back pocket and absently wiped his hands. "He is in the 3rd bay working on a Ford truck. You can go through the side door in the office and you will see the truck." "Thank you," Rockoff said. Rockoff and Sinclair moved through the door that led into a 3-bay garage. On the first rack, 5 feet above the air, was a red Honda. The next bay was empty, and in the third, the white Ford truck that Mr. Randall mentioned. The heavy scent of oil and gas hung in the garage air, and the buzz-buzz of a pneumatic wrench blended with the rock music blaring from a radio. "You should have taken the time to change," Sinclair said. "That pretty suit of yours could get trashed in a place like this." "It won't." "Want to bet?" Rockoff and Sinclair both reached to the straps on their gun holsters and unsnapped them. Neither were expecting trouble, but were ready for it. $10. "You're on." As they stepped around the red Honda, Rockoff spotted a mid-sized, lean man with a spotty beard. A mechanic's jumpsuit covered a white t-shirt and grazed the top of scuffed brown work boots. Thinning dark hair was slicked back. A spider tattoo clung to his neck. "Mr. Ingram," Rockoff said. The man looked up, and immediately gray eyes narrowed as he glanced from cop to cop. Ingram dropped the wrench in his hand and bolted to the other side of the Ford and out the front bay of the garage. "Shit," Rockoff said. Reacting instantly, Rockoff ran out the front bay. Sinclair, on his heels, reached for the radio on her hip and called local police, letting them know they were pursuing a suspect. A car pulling into the lot cut between Rockoff and Ingram, forcing Rockoff to stutter step sideways around the back side of the car. The delay allowed Ingram to put several more yards between them. Ingram ran across the asphalt parking lot toward Route 7, the 4-lane artery that ran into town. The traffic was light enough for him to cross the first 2 lanes of traffic, but the heavy flow headed west stopped him in the median strip filled with tall grass. He glanced back at Rockoff, who dashed toward Route 7. "Mr. Ingram, police, stop!" Rockoff shouted. Ingram glanced at Rockoff and then at the traffic headed toward him. He seemed to weigh the dangers of the police versus being hit by oncoming traffic. He ran into traffic. Car horns blared, brakes squealed. Ingram narrowly dodged a sport utility vehicle and with no other choice turned on his heel and ran back toward the median. He cut right when he saw Rockoff. "Son of a bitch," Rockoff muttered. He chased Ingram up the median. With each step, Rockoff closed in on Ingram, and when he was within feet, he lunged forward and grabbed the guy by the collar. Fabric in his suit ripped as he yanked Ingram to the ground. He quickly rolled the guy on his belly and put his knee into the small of his back as he reached for the cuffs on his belt. When Ingram struggled, Rockoff shoved his knee harder into the guy's spine until pain forced him to still. "You're fucking breaking my back!" "Stop resisting!" Sinclair arrived as Rockoff clicked the handcuffs in place and hauled Ingram to his feet. "Backup is on the way." Rockoff nodded, his teeth gritted. "Good." When traffic in the eastbound lane cleared, the trio crossed the road. 2 Leesburg police squad cars with lights flashing arrived just as they reached their car. A uniformed officer from each car got out and moved toward the detectives. The first to reach them was a short officer with broad shoulders and a thick black mustache. He appeared to be in his mid-40s. He introduced himself as Parker, and the other officer, a tall, slim man with auburn hair and freckles, as Adams, who couldn't have been older than 25. Officer Parker glanced between Sinclair and Rockoff and then at Ingram. "And what has Mr. Ingram done to warrant your attention?" Rockoff glanced at the grass stain on his jacket and swallowed an oath. "All we wanted to do was talk to him about a case we have in Alexandria. He wasn't in trouble until now." Ingram struggled with his cuffs. "These are too tight." "Too bad," Rockoff said. Sinclair met Parker's amused gaze. "So how is it that you know Mr. Ingram?" "He's been known to get a little loud when he drinks. Since he's been in town the last 6 months, we've had the opportunity to meet him a few times." "I ain't never been arrested," Ingram said. Parker shrugged. "Looks like you managed it now. Parole board is gonna love you." "I didn't do nothing." Ingram tried to twist free. Rockoff jerked up on the cuffs until Ingram stilled. "So Mr. Ingram is involved in one of your cases," Parker said. "A homicide," Rockoff said. "Shit!" Ingram's head jerked around. "I didn't kill nobody!" "Why'd you run?" Rockoff said. Ingram grunted as he strained against his handcuffs. "Because you look like the fucking mafia?" Sinclair glanced at Rockoff. She often joked that he looked like a wise guy when he wore his dark suit. "We're investigating the murder of a woman named Diane Young. She was tortured and then drowned. She ran an internet site called Beyond, and Mr. Ingram was one of her biggest customers." "What was she selling?" Parker said. "Horoscopes and tarot reading," Rockoff said. Parker chuckled. "What do you need to know from the great Beyond, Ingram?" Ingram frowned.
I was getting pics on the horse races. I tried her the first time just for fun, and when I won, I kept coming back. Turns out she was right more than she was wrong, so I kept coming back."
Sinclair arched a brow. "So how much did you end up losing?"
Ingram scowled. "I'm down $6,000. I had to hawk my watch and sell my car, but that's only because she didn't answer my email, and I was on my own for the last race."
"Where were you last week?" Rockoff said.
"I was down south at Colonial Downs near Richmond most of the week. Ask Mr. Randall. He nearly fired me for lost work, and I got stubs all over my apartment that shows I placed bets that day."
"We will check it all."
"We can hold him while you check his story," Parker said. "I ain't done nothing," Ingram said.
"You ran, pal," Parker said as he took hold of the guy's cuffs. "Should not have done that."
"But he looks like the fucking mob," Ingram complained. "He's got collection written all over him."
"I identified myself as police," Rockoff said. Parker shrugged. "Should have listened to him."
"Like the mob never lies," Ingram complained.
Rockoff waited as Parker switched a set of his cuffs for Rockoff's. "Where do you live, Mr. Ingram?"
"On Route 15. I share an apartment with a few guys."
"Will you give us permission to search your place?" Sinclair pulled a notebook from her pocket.
"Shit, yeah. I didn't kill nobody. My keys are in my back pocket."
Parker fished out the keys and handed them to Rockoff. Ingram supplied the address, and after a quick update with Mr. Randall, the detectives went to Ingram's apartment. The apartment was located in a beige cookie-cutter complex within a 3-story building. They found Ingram's apartment easily and opened the front door with the key he'd provided. The stench of old pizza and garbage greeted them.
"Damn," Sinclair said, raising her hand to her mouth. "It smells like something died in here."
Rockoff had removed his suit jacket when they'd gotten out of the car and rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt to his forearms. He flipped on the light, and they surveyed the main living room, furnished with a third-hand green couch, a couple of folding chairs, and a widescreen television resting on box crates. Trash, pizza boxes, dirty clothes, and beer cans littered the room. "Ingram said he shares with 2 other men. Likely we're just smelling filth. It amazes me how people live." Rockoff jingled Ingram's keys in his hands. "I thought you said you never met an iron you liked." "Hey, I might have a few wrinkles, but an extra spin in the dryer takes care of that, and my stuff in my apartment are clean. This is gross."
"We've seen worse."
They moved toward the center hallway to the back bedroom that Ingram said was his. A flip of another light switch revealed a mattress, no box spring, a rumpled quilt, and a pillow. Ingram said to look for his black jeans.
"His lucky jeans. Shit."
Sinclair slipped on rubber gloves and then moved to a pile of clothes. With thumb and index finger, she lifted a pair of jeans.
"Maybe his luck would be better if he washed them once in a while."
Rockoff donned his own gloves and dug into the pocket. He found a few rumpled dollar bills, a couple of pennies, and gum wrappers. It wasn't until he got to the back left pocket that he found the betting stubs. "Looks like he bought tickets on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, week before last."
"He was at Colonial Downs?"
"That he was." "It's a 2.5-hour drive from that track to Alexandria. A man could drive back and forth if he really wanted to establish an alibi. Diane appears to have been held for several days." Rockoff dug deeper into the pocket and came out with another stub. "Friday, and the timestamp is about the time Diane met our man in the van. And here's another stub for Monday. I'll call the track and have them pull surveillance tape and confirm it was Ingram who bought the ticket."
"Sounds good."
Sinclair shook her head. "The witch tattoo keeps coming back to me. What was the point of that?" He dropped the pants and scanned the room for anything else that might tell him more about Ingram. The visual sweep, including a horse race poster and stacks of race bulletins, simply confirmed that Ingram's spare time was spent at the tracks.
"I don't know."
Sinclair moved to a second-hand dresser and studied the collection of beer bottles, rumpled receipts, and loose change. "Maybe we should ask your pal Charlotte Wellington to look in her crystal ball and tell us what happened." Rockoff raised his gaze from a collection of well-read porn magazines on the edge of the bed.
"What are you talking about?"
Sinclair grinned. "There was a little buzz about her at the station this morning. Fact, I'm surprised you didn't hear it at the courthouse." "Spit it out, Sinclair." Annoyance snapped at the sing-song tone in her voice. She picked up on the irritation, but it simply sparked delight in her gaze. "Apparently she ran into Kane last night at the carnival and told him she used to work at Grady's carnival as a psychic." Out of the dozen past biographies he'd imagined for Charlotte, he'd never landed anywhere close to that one. Didn't take Levi long to spread the word, assuming it's true. You know how it goes. Alexandria is a big, small town. He likely told a few folks, and they told a few. There are enough in law enforcement who aren't crazy about the high and mighty Miss Wellington and are happy to gossip about her. He straightened and rested hands on hips. You don't like her. How can you tell? Was it the way I choked a little on her name? Rockoff moved out of the room. What's your beef with her? It's not personal. I mean, she's professional, and you know where you stand with her, but she's a defense attorney, and I don't like them as a general rule. Everyone has a right to a defense. So they tell me. He shook his head. He understood her sentiment. It was hard to work months on a case, secure an arrest, and see a scumbag walk. We're done here. When the place was locked up and both were headed back east, Sinclair studied Rockoff. You really like her. He tightened his hands on the wheel, wondering when his partner was going to let this bone go. Who? She brushed imaginary lint from her pant leg. Please, Wellington, you like her. Why do you say that? 'Cause I've heard you bitch about defense attorneys before, but never Miss Wellington, and we all have a right to a defense. Shit, you've never said that. She's smart, owns a successful business. I respect that. She snorted. You like the way she fills out a tight skirt better than her brain. True, but there was so much more to her. What's with you trying to hook me up with her? You were busting my balls about her the other day. She folded her arms over her chest. Because it takes a lot to get a reaction out of you, and when I mention her, you become a wind-up toy with a hair trigger. All I have to do is sit back and watch the show. Sinclair, if anyone needs romance right now, it's you, not me. You need a life. She shrugged. True, so very true. But until I do get a man, I can live vicariously through your relationships. I don't have a relationship. Correct enough on so many levels that it wasn't far from a lie. Rockoff wondered what the cops would say if they knew of his connection to Charlotte. Shit, he knew. It would be open season. Positioning a body was akin to a holy ritual. Over the years, he'd grown quite rote in his approach. Eyes to the sky, arms outstretched, clothes neatly arranged, and, of course, the witch tattoo on the forehead of the slain. Today, however, he'd taken an extra moment to cover the windows. He'd had the growing sensation that someone was watching him. Grace, no doubt. So he'd taped garbage bags on the windows so that she could not see him and try to stop him. God is in the details, he whispered. He adjusted Maya's head so that it was a little straighter, and then he fanned out her hair around her face. Death had vanquished the evil from her body, and she looked so utterly peaceful. He leaned forward and kissed her lips. Go with God. He glanced around the abandoned office floor. A sliver of moonlight illuminated the building's third floor. Wires hung from a dropped ceiling. The industrial gray carpets were still indented with the impressions of long-gone cubicles, and watermarks stained the west wall. Outside the large window, stars winked behind wisps of clouds above the Alexandria skyline. By early morning, the place would be filled with workmen ready to demo the building. In the early days, he didn't take the time to position his prey. He simply dumped the bodies and ran. In those days, he did mark his victims, but only with crude lettering carved with a knife. Many times, the word was illegible and the warnings to the world unclear. That's the way it had been with his first. He'd been so scared in the hours and days after her kill. Each time the phone had rung or someone had knocked on his door, he was sure it was the police. But the days and weeks passed and no one came for him. Realizing he'd gotten away with murder, he'd been jazzed and had gone to a tattoo artist. He'd had the witch's name tattooed on his bicep as a reminder that real evil existed and that he must always be vigilant. He glanced at the faded tattoo. Grace. He told the artist she was his girlfriend and he wanted her to be a part of him forever. The artist had suggested a heart wrapped in roses. He'd liked the idea, but told the man to add thorns as well. They both shared a big laugh over the perils of love. But he'd just come to realize he'd not killed Grace. She had sent a decoy to take her place. He pulled the stakes and mallet from his backpack. Carefully, he positioned the pointed edge of the stake on her open palm and then hammered it through the cold flesh into the hard floor. He repeated the task on her next palm and then her feet. Breathless, he backed away from the witch, taking one last moment to admire her. He pulled a bag of salt from the same bag and drew a clean, careful circle around her body. He etched a pentagram in the dirt just below her feet. Perhaps God had denied him grace so that he would learn to grow as a hunter. And now, with the carnival in town again, he had to admit that life had certain symmetry. God had not only revealed to him sooner the witch's spawn, but gifted him with grace. Chapter 16. Wednesday, October 27th, 6 a.m. Rockoff had gone home well after midnight and fallen into bed exhausted. For 8 days, they'd been chasing leads and talking to all of Young's clients. They'd walked the crime scene and the area around it until their feet ached. They'd revisited Diane's sister, spoken to neighbors, but there'd been no leads on their killer. Dr. Hansen had found skin scrapings under the victim's fingernails, but DNA results had yet to come back from the Commonwealth's lab. He wasn't holding his breath for a quick return. The backlog at the state lab was crushing, and even a high-priority case had weeks to wait. The call from uniformed patrol came just after 6 in the morning. His buzzing cell phone woke him up out of a sleep so sound it had been dreamless. Sitting up bolt straight, he checked his watch and snapped up his phone. Rockoff? It's dispatch. Uniforms found a body of a young woman. She was killed like your victim. His victim. He shoved out a breath and swung his legs over the side of his bed. Where? He scratched out the address on a pad always on his bedside table and told dispatch he'd be on the scene in a half hour. As he moved across the room, stiff muscles aired their grievances. The bed is too small, the mattress too soft. Flexing his shoulders up and down, he kept moving. As he reached the bathroom door, he heard his grandmother moving down the house's center hallway toward the kitchen. He could tell her to go back to bed, as he'd done so many times in the last couple of weeks, but she'd simply wave him away as she brewed him a strong cup of black tea and toasted a bagel for him. He ducked under a hot shower and let the water pulse over his face. He turned his back to the hot spray, wishing he could stand there for an hour and let the heat work the tension from the muscles in his shoulders, but there was no time for that. He quickly toweled off and dressed in khakis, a long-sleeved shirt, and brown-laced shoes. He slid a leather belt through the pant loops and attached his gun holster, cell, and cuffs. When he entered the kitchen, his grandmother had set the bagel and black tea on her small kitchen table. How many times had he sat at this table as a kid, as she'd made him a snack after school? He kissed her on the cheek. You did not have to get up. As expected, she waved him away. Of course I did. You must eat. I can always grab something on the road. He bit into a bagel purchased at the Russian deli. Bagels from the chain stores were never as good as these. I saw your suit. Yeah, I'll get it to Dad. I've already taken it. He says to not dress up when you chase bad guys. I try, but sometimes the bad guys don't give me time to change. He sipped the black tea. She dropped a sugar cube into it to ease the bitterness. It will be ready by Friday. Dad doesn't have to rush. He does not mind. She moved to an avocado green refrigerator that dated back to the 1970s and pulled out a bottle of orange juice. I mind. He's busy enough. He is your father. He loves you. Let him do this for you. She filled a glass with juice and sat across from him. She sipped as he ate his bagel. Daniel, it is time you move back to your apartment. He glanced up at her. Alexa will be back in a couple of days, and then I will. I am glad you two stayed with me while I was sick, but I am better now. Now you and your sister must leave my house. I like it here. She arched a brow, sensing a lie behind the words. I've said it before. A young man needs his own life. A young woman needs her own life. She raised her chin. I changed the locks in 2 weeks. He laughed. You're kicking us out? Yes. I have spoken to your father and mother, and they agree that you and Alexa must live your own lives. Do they agree you should live alone? She was old, but no less cagey than a seasoned thief in a police interview room. That is my concern, not yours or theirs. He wasn't sure what was driving this or why she chose to tell him now. I don't have time to talk about this now. There is nothing to talk about. You have 2 weeks. She hesitated. I need my space. Space? That is the right word, no? It's the right word. Okay, you need space. I'll talk to Dad. Talk all you want, but the locks will change. I'm in the middle of a murder investigation. She shrugged. Then, after you catch your bad guy, I will change the locks. He rose, kissed her on the forehead, and grabbed his thermos. Aren't you worried Alexa and I will starve if we leave? She shook her head. You both can cook. You just choose not to. We've got you. Which is the problem. You need a woman. She needs a man. Neither of you needs a doting grandmother. Now go and find your bad man. It was an order, not a request, and he had no doubt that if he didn't move his things back to his apartment, she'd put them on the curb. She loved him, wanted the best, and she'd kick him and his sister to the curb to see that they got it. Rockoff left his grandmother sipping orange juice at the kitchen table. All thoughts of his grandmother's edict had left Rockoff's mind by the time he pulled up in front of the crime scene, an abandoned office building on Van Dorn. The parking lot was filled with 7 police cruisers with lights flashing. The parking lot had been roped off with yellow crime scene tape, and news crews had gathered across the street. He rubbed the back of his neck and got out of his car. Sinclair was on the scene, as were Detectives Deacon Garrison and Malcolm Keir. The three stood together, watching as a trio of forensics technicians moved into the old modular office building, likely built in the 50s. No doubt in its day it had been cutting-edge design. Now it looked dated and old. The grass in the parking lot islands was tall and unkempt, and the asphalt pitted and cracked. A large, weathered, for sale lease sign lay by a demolition dumpster. Now the land was worth more than the structure. Rockoff nodded to Sinclair as he approached Garrison. What do we have? A woman murdered? No signs of a gunshot or knife wound? Water in the mouth. Drowned? No signs of a fatal wound, but I'll leave the final verdict to the medical examiner, Garrison said. Tension crawled up his spine. Was her body positioned like the first woman? Yes. She was placed on her back, arms and feet extended and staked, salt ring around her body, tattoo on her forehead. Witch? Yes. Garrison nodded toward the press. The brass is going to be pushing us hard on this one. 2 women murdered in less than 2 weeks. Rockoff glanced at the television news vans and the camera crews rolling film. Have you made a statement? Not yet, Garrison said. I'd like to have more to say. Rockoff rested hands on his hips. Did the victim have any identification? Sinclair moved up from behind him, her notebook flipped open. None. Forensics is rolling prints. We're hoping for some kind of match. Any missing persons reports? None that match her description, but that could change. Garrison frowned. All right, you two, go have a look. I'll talk to the press. Find me a killer, people. Rockoff and Sinclair ducked under the yellow crime scene tape and donned rubber gloves and paper booties before they entered the building. Rockoff glanced up at a surveillance camera posted by the front door and noted someone had spray-painted black paint on the lens. This son of a bitch is really thinking this through. He turned and surveyed the buildings around them. He couldn't have gotten them all. We'll need to visit every building in the area, and if they've got cameras, watch their tapes. It's like finding a damn needle in the haystack. They climbed the stairs, passing several uniformed officers on the way up to the 2nd floor. The 3rd floor was a large, wide-open box illuminated by large fluorescent ceiling lights. Red crime scene tape, which forensics reserved for the most sensitive areas, greeted them. The detectives moved to the edge of the tape, where Polly stood just inside the room, snapping photographs. Polly, still aiming his camera, said, "Your boss has already been here." "We saw him." "And he told you the killer has a distinct pattern. This crime scene is very similar to the last scene." "Yeah." The technician stepped aside so Rockoff and Sinclair could look into the room. The victim lay in the center of the floor, positioned on her back, limbs outstretched and staked to the ground. Fully dressed, her hair was splayed out behind her head, and a ring of salt encircled her body. Pentagrams were drawn on 2 of the walls, and 3 large glass windows had been blocked off with large plastic garbage bags and duct tape. He moved into the room and stared at the woman's face. She had a wide-set jaw, high cheekbones, and dark hair. She'd not been stunning, but pretty. She appeared to be in her mid to late 40s, wore a blue peasant skirt and loose-fitting white blouse and jean jacket. The word witch had been tattooed on her forehead in careful block letters that measured an inch high and an inch wide. Rokov forced out a breath. The skin on the forehead is thin. I know, pretty fucking painful. Sinclair was careful to keep her emotions checked, but there were moments when her anger bubbled to the surface. Covering the windows is different, Rokov said. Maybe he wanted more privacy, Sinclair said. Or he's scared. Let's hope. The circle is as defined as the last. He likes to take his time. He likes precision. He picks places where no one goes, Sinclair added. Abandoned places. He's got a system. He's obsessive-compulsive about getting the details right. He stared at the neat circle. He's done this before Diane Young. There've been no VICAP hits. VICAP was the Violent Crimes Database. Though effective, it wasn't foolproof because not every jurisdiction inputted crimes into the system. Maybe this is the first time he decided to show off his work to the world. Maybe whatever he did before, he hid because he didn't want to be discovered. So why go for an audience now? Ego? Maybe he's tired of working in obscurity. He wants the world to know what he's doing. A master needs his work recognized. Bitterness dripped from the words. Rokov studied the salt circle and tried to imagine the killer painstakingly dribbling it out. He had more control over this scene. Think he needs more control? Rokov nodded. If he thinks he's slipping, sure. Control is important to him. Control and attention. I'm wondering if something has changed in his life. Maybe he lost a job, his girlfriend broke up with him, or he's sick. Or his boss yelled at him, or his dog died. It could be a million reasons. These guys don't need much of an excuse to do what they do. You're right. He stared at the blacked-out windows. But something has changed for him, and I'm willing to bet it's fairly drastic. First, he goes public with his kills. Second, he's getting more precise with his crime scene. This is more than ego. This is anger. At a woman in his life? It would be my guess. She shoved out a sigh. We need to find out who Jane Doe is as soon as possible. I agree, and I'm going to resubmit to the Violent Crimes Database system and see if I get a hit this time. I'm also putting heat on the forensics lab. I want the DNA put in combined DNA index system sooner than later. Detective Rokov? Polly called out. Rokov glanced back to find the technician holding up a small orange ticket stub. What is that? Found this in her pocket. It's a ticket stub from the carnival. Does it have a date? 4 days ago? Thanks. He looked at Sinclair. That's 2 for 2 in the carnival. We need to figure out where the carnival has been in recent years and check the jurisdictions to see which ones might have had murders not submitted to the Violent Crimes Database. The carnival visits a lot of small rural areas. This area is the big exception. Smaller localities don't always input into the Violent Crimes Database, which might explain the lack of hits. Once you get their travel schedule, we'll check with the jurisdictions directly. Want to talk to Grady again? I sure do. Rokov thought about the grizzled old man, who he suspected lied as easily as he breathed. But I think what I'm going to do is talk to Charlotte Wellington. Why her? If your gossip is true, Sinclair, and she is linked to the carnival, she might have some interesting information. What about Sooner Tate? He thought about the lifestyle focus on Sooner. Effective for public relations, but reckless when it came to the girl's safety. You talk to her. I'll talk to Charlotte. Chapter 17. Wednesday, October 27th, 9 a.m. Knowing Charlotte would likely be at her office, Rokov headed to the offices of Wellington and James. He rang the front bell and waited for the receptionist to buzz him inside. Detective Rokov, the receptionist said. She was in her mid-50s and wore a dark dress, matching headband, and flats. You know me, but I'm afraid I don't know you. I'm Ms. Wellington's secretary and basically manager of all things that have to do with Wellington and James. Call me Iris, and I know you, Alexandria Police. He'd heard Charlotte had hired a top-notch assistant with an uncanny memory for names. Is Ms. Wellington here? She is. You'd like to see her? I would. Be right back. She vanished down a carpeted hallway, giving him time to study the reception area. The place was sleek and had a moneyed, old-world feel that fit the public Charlotte. She'd always carried herself as if she'd been raised with a silver spoon, and it still amazed him that she might have grown up in a carnival. Perhaps this place, like the carnival, was just an elaborate set designed to support the fantasy. "Detective?" Charlotte's smooth, clear voice had him turning from a Hunt country painting toward her. She wore a black pencil skirt, white-fitted blouse, heels, and the pearls she'd had on the last time they'd made love. She swept her hair into a French twist, accentuating her long neck and high cheekbones. "Miss Wellington." Suspicion darkened her eyes. "What can I do for you, Detective?" "Is there someplace private we can talk?" Green eyes grew wary. "Why?" "You'll see." A narrowing of her gaze told him she wanted to give him the bum's rush. She wasn't comfortable. Was she simply busy or embarrassed by his visit? Just the idea he embarrassed her set his nerves on edge. And so he waited, determined not to budge an inch. "This can't wait?" she said. No. In the past, when they were alone, he'd allowed her to run the show. However, this was no game, and he called the shots. Sensing the steel in his resolve, she nodded. "In my office." He followed her down the hallway to the back office. It didn't appear to be the largest of the offices, but it was the most private and remote. She'd placed a large decorative screen behind her desk that blocked the view of the street. Was that a holdover from her attack 3 years ago? She closed the office door and motioned for him to take one of the club chairs in front of her antique desk. "Have a seat." He waited until she'd moved behind him and took the seat behind her desk before he sat. "Taking up a defensive position?" She knitted her long manicured fingers together. "Do I need to?" 5 feet and that damn desk separated them, but it might as well have been 1,000,000 miles and a brick wall. "I heard through the grapevine that you used to work for the carnival." Surprise and then acceptance crossed her face. She raised a brow. "Is that the latest gossip about me?" "Is it true?" She hesitated. "Does it matter?" "I have a second victim. There might be a link to the carnival." Her face paled. "Oh my God, I didn't know." "No one does yet." "What does the murder have to do with me and the carnival?" Always the attorney scoping the lay of the land before you answer. "Second nature." She shrugged. "It's true, I grew up in the carnival." He sat back in his chair, realizing this was the first bit of personal information she'd acknowledged. "You cultivate the impression that you come from a very different place." She released a breath. "It was deliberate." "Why pretend to be something you're not?" Her gaze narrowed. "Did you come here to quiz me about why I don't talk about my past? Because if that is the case, I've got too much work to stroll down memory lane right now." He made no move to rise. "There is a method to my madness. Why the deception?" "Why do you care?" He managed a grin that wasn't so friendly. "Humor me." She offered a small shrug. "I wouldn't exactly call it a deception. I wanted to go into defense law and discovered back in law school that the people with money like to work with people who have money. I figured out the nuances of being from a certain world and embraced them." Spoken like a defense attorney. "I've never lied about my credentials on my curriculum vitae. I don't mention high school, but I did graduate from George Mason and Georgetown." "On scholarship?" "Partly. I also worked my butt off." "Doing what?" She sat back in her chair. "I don't see where this is headed." "It relates to a case, I promise." She pressed fingertips to her temples as if they now throbbed. "Can you keep it to yourself?" "Sure, if it has nothing to do with the case." She released a breath slowly and then met his gaze. "I was a stripper. I worked in a club called Gold's." If not for his own first-hand experience with the prim Miss Wellington, he'd have discounted the story. He knew under the ice was fire. "I know the place, in the District of Columbia." "That's right." "I worked undercover there a couple of years ago." He'd watched the strippers, appreciated a few, but had not given any of them much thought at the time. Placing Charlotte on one of those stripper poles did not sit well with him. She seemed to read his disapproval. "That would have been long after my time." "How long were you there?" 5 years, from 18 to 23. "No one recognized you from those days?" "I wore a wig and a half mask. It was part of my mystique, a trick I learned at the carnival. It also protected me from the embarrassing run-ins with professors and friends." Always hiding behind a mask. Not so much anymore. Did you have run-ins at the club with people you knew? I saw them. They didn't see me beyond the costume and act. She traced imaginary circles on her ink blotter. It's amazing how many people turn their noses up at places like Gold and still slip by when the sun goes down. I'm not turning my nose up. Aren't you? I don't like the idea of any man leering at you. His tone had lowered to a growl, but I'm not judging. She didn't answer. He now knew when she was silent, it didn't mean she was cold or unfeeling, but worried or stressed. Did you turn tricks? No. The word was clear, crisp, and without hesitation. What if I'd said yes? I'd have to find my way around it. Better to know the truth than nothing at all. Again, she was silent. When did you leave the carnival? When I was 16. Why'd you leave? She shook her head. I've given you far more than I've ever given anyone. Now it's your turn to give back. Where's this going? I'm asking the questions. Not until you tell me why. What does my past have to do with your murder investigation? I could arrest you and we can talk at my office. She laughed. Don't pull that cop line on me, detective. Don't. You would not arrest me. I would, in a heartbeat. And I will drag out the question and answer session until we all go insane. Tell me why, and I will help you. He could force this, and no matter how long she dragged out a question and answer, he'd win in the end. But he wanted them on the same team. What I'm sharing with you now isn't public knowledge. I don't want the details getting out to the media. Seems to be the day for secrets. They always crawl into the light eventually. So it seems. She sounded resigned, sad even. Why the interest in the carnival? We found a carnival ticket stub in the second victim's pocket. The stub was dated 4 days ago. Her brows knitted. So both women were at the carnival? Yes. Have you talked to Grady Tate, the carnival's owner? Not yet, but I will. Right now I want to know what you know about the carnival. Charlotte stared at Rockoff. When it came to stone-cold stares, he easily matched hers. They both could be unreadable. She sat forward in her chair and pressed her fingertips to the desk. Do you think Grady has something to do with these women's deaths? I don't know. Could he have killed them? I don't think so, but I'm discovering there is a great deal that I don't know about Grady. Start from the top. How did you two meet? He married my mother. I was 8 and my sister Mariah was 9. We were living in a motel. Mom was waitressing when he came into her diner. They hit it off. He asked her to marry him, and she said yes. Just like that? My mother was quite impulsive. She was also quite moody. I think if she'd ever seen a real doctor, they'd have diagnosed her as bipolar. Grady met her when she was up and full of energy and life. She was a lovely woman and not even 30. Before I knew it, we traded the motel for Grady's trailer and were traveling around the country with his carnival. He's your stepfather? He was my stepfather. My mother died when I was 13. Is that when you left the carnival? I didn't leave for a couple more years. I stayed because I had no real place to go. I knew my mother had an older sister, but I didn't know how to find her, so I stayed. Grady put my sister and me to work in the Madame Divine tent as the carnival psychic, just as he had our mother. We wore the same costume, but rotated shifts. His jaw tightened a fraction. You don't approve? A child should be in school. We did have a tutor of sorts within the carnival. She was good, but I quickly was asking questions more detailed than she could answer. She was good about getting me books to read, and when I finally was placed in a real school, I was on par with most of the kids. Why did you finally leave? She moistened her lips. Mariah drowned? I freaked out. I was sure someone had murdered her, but Grady kept telling me it was an accident. When I refused to believe him, Grady found my aunt and told me I could go live with her if I wanted to leave the carnival. I did. He leaned forward. Where did Mariah die? We were in Alexandria. It was the end of the season, as it is now. She went to work that night and never came back. She swallowed. Did Grady call the cops? She closed her eyes. He said he did, but I'm not so sure now. He's a liar. He pulled out his notebook. What was her full name? Mariah Angel Wells. What happened that last night? I'd drifted off to sleep. Sooner was less than a week old, and she was with me. I woke up to the sounds of a woman's screams.
I bolted out of bed, checked on the baby, and then ran to Grady's trailer. He had just come back from somewhere. I told him Mariah was missing, and he organized a search party. They found her by a lake. Later, he said she must have fallen into the water and hit her head.
You don't sound so sure.
I believed him then, but I don't now. He's told me too many lies.
She flexed her fingers on the mat like a starfish.
In the days after Mariah's death, I kept hearing her screams in my sleep. Finally, I thought I'd go insane, so I demanded that he let me go live with my aunt. I also told him I was taking Sooner.
He refused.
How did you know?
She grew up in the carnival, not with you.
Grady told me he put her up for adoption. He said I was too young to raise a baby, and I knew she deserved a real home.
He didn't respond. For the first time, he wondered if she did indeed come with far too many tangles and baggage. He just dug his way out of a mess with his ex.
I wish now I'd taken her with me. The carnival was no place for her. I wanted to take her and raise her, and I knew Grady was a liar. I knew it, and still I let myself believe.
How old were you?
16.
So young to be a mother.
I would have made it work.
She reached in her desk drawer and pulled out the photo. She held it out to him, and he accepted the other side. For a moment, the yellowed photo connected them.
This is how I remember Mariah.
He took the picture. Sooner looks a lot like her.
She does. She even sounds like her.
Could Grady have killed Mariah?
He really did adore her. I know he can lie and cheat better than anyone, but he loved Mariah.
Women are often killed by people they know. I've read the statistics. She shook her head. We had a lot of people in and out of the carnival that summer. Any still around?
A few. I saw them the other night.
Are you sure you didn't wake to hear Mariah really screaming? Maybe she was killed near your trailer. She stiffened as if she'd never considered the option.
All these years, I assumed the screams were a dream.
She shook her head.
I wasn't awake. I know that.
How do you know that?
She closed her eyes, not wanting to see his reaction. Because the dreams and screams have returned.
When?
The lack of censure had her raising her gaze. A few weeks.
I thought it was because the carnival was back in the area and old stuff was getting stirred up,
but they are so vivid.
Who's Sooner's father?
A boy in a small town in Franklin, Tennessee. When the carnival left Franklin, the relationship ended.
Maybe he still had an interest in Mariah?
No.
He blinked. What was Sooner's father's name?
He gave the name of Matt Davis, but that proved to be a lie when Grady tried to find him. He'd come to the carnival with sweet lies, looking for fun, and no intention of ever being found. And in retrospect, he was smart. Grady wanted to kill him.
His jaw tensed.
I can only imagine what you're thinking.
Not as dire as you might think.
She nodded. You're going to ask around about Mariah?
I am.
Do you think her disappearance is related?
Maybe.
Why?
This killer has a thing for witches. He's drowned one and likely the second and marked both with tattoos. Both had connections to the carnival, and at least one had a fortune-teller thing going on. So, yeah, I think Mariah fits the profile.
Honestly, you could be talking about me as well.
I know, which is why I want you to be very careful.
She offered a smile she was not feeling. I am careful.
We all think we are careful until we're faced with a nut who is determined to kill and has nothing to lose.
She offered him a wan smile. I've been faced with a nut and survived.
You were lucky.
I'll be careful, I promise. He rose, and so did she. However, he moved around the desk and closed the gap between them.
So is the past the reason you wanted to keep things cool between us?
Color rose in her face. It's not wise to mix business with pleasure. He stood at least 6 inches taller than her.
I'm not asking you what's wise or not. I'm asking if your past has built that wall of ice around you.
I don't know. She shook her head. I know. The answer is yes. I saw my mother win and lose more men than I can count, and I witnessed enough girls at the club fall for a guy, reveal all, and then lose all. So let's just say I've not seen many successful relationships, so I keep mine light.
I've been thinking about the ground rules you set up.
Nothing has changed. He cupped her chin in his hand. The touch was gentle but possessive.
He kissed her softly on the lips. "Time to renegotiate the rules, counselor." For an instant, she stood stunned, the soft pressure of his lips lingering on her own. "I don't renegotiate." "I do." Grady stood in the growing shadows, staring at the little curio shop located on Washington Street. Ageless had closed 20 minutes ago, and the entire brick building was dark except for the light in the room facing the side street. Sooner was in that room, moving, carrying, and unpacking boxes. Tonight, Sooner had told him she was leaving the carnival when it closed next week. He thought she was kidding at first, and had laughed. She'd gotten pissed and stalked out of his trailer. He'd decided to give her time to cool off and realized she had nowhere to go. He was her life. Tonight was her scheduled night off, and in years past, she always spent her night off alone in her trailer reading. When he'd knocked on her door ready to make peace, he'd realized she wasn't there. He'd scrambled around the fairgrounds looking for her until Obie had told him she'd driven into Old Town. 2 years ago, he'd put a tracker on her car, and so he'd activated it. He'd found her easily. Now, as the evening cold seeped into his bones, he was torn between dragging her home and letting her learn firsthand some of life's nasty lessons. He'd taken care of everything since she was a baby. She'd wanted for nothing, and now she was leaving him. She passed in front of the window again and stared out, almost as if she knew he was out there. He sank deeper into the shadows. God, but she looked so much like Mariah. It was easy to watch and listen to her and be transported back to the time when Mariah had been alive and so full of life. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine Mariah's laugh and the way her eyes lit up when he gave her a new, shiny piece of jewelry. Just having her close had breathed life into him and made him excited about getting up each morning. And then, just as quickly, she was gone. He glanced at his hands, remembering how cold her body had felt the last time he'd touched her. He fisted his fingers. He'd have given his own life in that moment if he could have taken back the events of that day. As he'd raised his poor dead Mariah in his arms, he'd held her close to his chest, whispering in her ear that he forgave her and would take care of her. She didn't need to worry anymore. No one, not even he, could ever hurt her again. On that long-ago night, he'd glanced around the isolated stretch of woods and knew he couldn't leave her out in the woods for the animals to find. So he'd carried her body to the lake and laid her down, knowing she'd soon be found. He'd returned to camp and found Grace banging on his trailer door, demanding to see Mariah. Grace was more like her mother than she'd ever dare admit. She had the sight, though she'd done her best to deny it all her life. He'd organized a search party and soon led the group to Mariah. And now, as he stared up at Sooner's window and watched her pass, he had to wonder what she was doing with this new shop of hers. Did she really think she could make a new life? A car pulled up in front of the shop and parked. He recognized the BMW and wondered how Charlotte knew about Sooner's secret place. "Figures you'd be mixed up in this, Grace. You always were the one that stirred up trouble." He watched as Charlotte made a call on her cell phone. Upstairs, Sooner answered hers, and seconds later was downstairs to greet Charlotte. The two vanished back inside the building. Grace had put stupid, terrible thoughts into Mariah's head back in the day. Education, independence, life doesn't have to be this way. She'd done her best to shit all over the world he had built. And now she was trying to do the same thing again. He'd brought Sooner back to her for a specific reason that had nothing to do with Grace. If not for Sooner's arrest and likely incarceration, he doubted they'd ever have stood face to face. But the kid had gotten into trouble, and his back was to the wall, so he'd been forced to call Grace. He'd not expected to find her so changed and so well, and her success had stuck in his craw. He'd given in to pride and rubbed salt into her old wounds, and he'd taken pleasure in her pain. But once he'd had his fun, he'd expected that to be that. He would keep what was his, and she would be left alone. But as always, Grace had her own plans. "Well, you ain't winning this tug-of-war, bitch." He'd have dealt with her right here and now, but he had a more pressing matter, another person to hunt down. The smells of fresh paint mingled with the mugugai pan, fried rice, and steamed veggies packed in Charlotte's takeout bag. The room was now a soft purple. The color had softened the stark white and gave the room a warm and serene feel. "The place looks great." Sooner wore her long hair up, a red sweatshirt now splashed with purple paint, and cut-off jeans. "I'm really loving this place." "Hey, I'm sorry things didn't end so well for us the last time. I seem to have a talent for irritating you." "You piss me off." Charlotte shrugged. "It's a talent." Sooner laughed. "I can be pretty irritating as well." Charlotte relaxed, grateful they were back again on peaceful ground. "I can see you've worked hard. So what's next?" "I found the coolest bureau at a yard sale. The owner is a sweetie, and he's promised to deliver it to me tomorrow. Also, I bought a mirror from him and a couple of chairs. The space will be sparse at first, but it will fill in with time." The girl's excitement had stripped away the cool, sophisticated air, and she looked just like an 18-year-old kid. "You're making real headway." "I can't wait until it's all done." "Don't suppose you're hungry?" "I'm starving." "Good." Sooner pulled up 2 folding chairs and placed them by a large box. "It's not a fancy table, but it will do." "I don't mind if you don't." They each took a seat, and Charlotte handed out napkins, forks, and a couple of sodas. "So what's in this box?" "Fabrics. A store was just going to throw them out. I took them, knowing there will be something I can make." She handed Sooner a bento box. "Dig in." "This is great. You didn't have to do it, especially considering I was a bitch to you the last time I saw you." "I was worried about you." She stabbed a piece of broccoli with her fork. "You tell Grady you were leaving?" "Yeah." Charlotte stared at her food. "How did it go?" "I don't think he believed me. He laughed. He said I didn't have anywhere to go, and I had to stay with him. I told him to piss off and stormed out." "He didn't follow?" "No, he understands it's final with me." Charlotte shook her head. "Grady doesn't let go very easily, Sooner. He's not going to just watch you walk away from his carnival. There's always a price to pay." "You walked away." She set her fork down. "I was more trouble than I was worth." Sooner's eyes twinkled. "Really?" Charlotte smiled. "I can be a bitch, if you haven't noticed." "No, really?" "Smart-ass." They both laughed and settled into a silence. "Did he get along with Mariah?" She kept her voice low and her gaze down. "He liked her because she was beautiful, and she was sweet-tempered and so full of life. She could light up a room. I could be a handful." "Why'd you leave?" "It was after Mariah died. I was having a lot of bad dreams and had to leave." For a long moment, neither spoke. "I wanted to take you with me, but Grady said he was going to put you up for adoption. I thought he'd let us both go. I thought if I let him put you up for adoption, we'd both have a chance at a real life." Sooner stared at a fork full of food. "Grady always said you didn't want me." Charlotte set her plate aside and laid her hand on Sooner's. 18 years of sadness threatened to overflow. "That's not true. I always wanted the best for you. He swore you'd have a normal life." She shook her head. "I should have known he'd have a trick up his sleeve. I should have tracked him down and followed up, but he swore." Sooner shrugged. "Shit happens." Charlotte kept her hand on Sooner's arm. "I'd like us to be friends." Sooner's gaze filled with frustration and sadness. "Why?" "We're family." Tears filled her eyes, and several spilled down her cheek. She shook her head and looked as if she wanted to say something, but then rejected it. "Did my mom love me?" Tell her. Tell her." "She loved you very much." She swept away a tear. "I think I've hated her all my life." "She never hated you." For several minutes they sat in silence. "Look, Sooner, I'm not so foolish to think we're going to come together like the Brady Bunch." "The who?" "Never mind. I just want us to be close. No strings, just friends. Wouldn't it be nice to know you have someone to call if there's trouble?" "Sure, I guess." "I'm here if you need me." She reached in her coat pocket. "I want to give you some cash. Think of it as a housewarming gift." "Thanks, but no money." She dug deeper in her purse for her wallet. "Why not? You can use it to furnish the place." "No charity. I work for my money, period." She'd not expected that. "Please take the money." "No." She shoved out a breath, realizing her respect for the girl had risen sharply. I'm throwing a charitable fundraiser. It's kind of a Halloween theme. Actually, my partner is doing all the work. Proceeds go to cancer research. It's this Saturday. Good. We could use a card reader, someone to liven up the party. I mean, Angie's got a band and food and jugglers, but no card readers. It's honest work, and it pays well. She stared at Charlotte for a long moment. It's for charity. Yeah. Sure, I'll do it, but I'll donate my services. I want to pay you. No, I can give just like everyone else. I want to pay you. If it will make you feel better, I'll bring my shiny new business cards and pass them out. I'll consider it a marketing event. Charlotte shook her head. Why won't you let me help you? No one helped you. No, and I took some shortcuts that I regret. It would be nice if you could avoid mistakes like that. I won't make those mistakes. Charlotte arched a brow. Sooner. You'll keep me on the right path, I've no doubt. She smiled. I'm going to do my best. The two ate in silence for several minutes before Charlotte said, I want you to be very careful. There's a nutcase out there killing women. I read about that woman in the paper. You'll be reading about another one in the morning paper. She was killed the same way. That doesn't mean I'm in danger. This guy seems to have a thing for strong women and the carnival. Grady's carnival. I think you could be his perfect victim. He dug the knife blade into the end of the wooden shaft and pushed hard until the wood splintered and slid free. Without much thought, he repeated the process over and over until the tip of the wood reached razor sharpness. Setting the knife down, he pressed his thumb to the tip, watching in fascination as his skin tore and bled. Smiling, he laid the stake down next to the 7 others he'd fashioned. 4 were reserved for Sooner and 4 for Grace. 2 witches, 2 deaths. Excitement sent his heart gaveling against his ribs. Their deaths would be a great triumph that he would savor for a very long time. Drawing a breath as he stood, he wiped the blood from his thumb with a rag. As much as he wanted to stay in this room, sequestered with his thoughts and fantasies, it was time to focus on his life outside. He had another life with people who loved him, despite his dedication to justice. Tonight, he'd promised his love a real date. It would be time for just the 2 of them. He would find the right words to say, listen as a lover should, and win back her love. Even a warrior needed a life outside of battle. He carefully rolled down the sleeves of his shirt, fastened his cuffs, and then tugged them down over his wrists. The cuts in his arms were bandaged, but he still had to be careful. It wouldn't do to start bleeding again. As he slid on his jacket, he glanced at the wall where he displayed his photos. They were the faces of evil, the witches he had slain. Maya had brought the number of images to 18. Gently, he traced the photo image of her terrified face. Satisfaction collided with anticipation. By Saturday night, the number of photos on his wall would be 20. Chapter 18. Thursday, October 28th, 11 a.m. Rockoff had expected a needle in the haystack when he'd started searching for Mariah Wells. Armed with her name, a picture, and the date she died, he didn't hold out much hope that he'd find anything. He contacted the surrounding jurisdictions, gave them her vital statistics, and asked them to check morgue files. He also called Dr. Henson and asked her to review old autopsy files. It was just after 11 when Sinclair appeared in his doorway, file in hand. I've got all the missing persons reports on women who match our second victim. He took the files from her. Great. Word is you're asking about another missing persons case. What gives? How do you know everything? It's a gift, and I've also got a file from Fairfax. An officer just dropped it off. It's the file you requested. Mariah Wells. Jane Doe, as far as he's concerned. She glanced at the folder tab. Murdered 18 years ago. Rockoff sat back in his chair and dragged his hands over his short hair. He opened the file and examined the autopsy picture. She'd been dead at least a day. Her lips had turned black and her skin a sallow gray. But this was Mariah. Who is she? She was Charlotte Wells's sister, Mariah Wells. Charlotte doesn't know her sister is dead? She knows. She believes she drowned in an accident. That chick did not die accidentally. You looked at the file already? Sure. It isn't often you call in favors. That's not your style. I had to see what all the fuss was about. I take it she's related to Sooner Tate? Mother? Has to be. She gave birth at 17 and was murdered shortly after. So Charlotte is the girl's aunt? Explains why she was with her in court. Yeah. So how did you find out about Mariah? I asked her about working in the carnival. The rumors are true. When I told her about the second murder and that both victims had been to the carnival, she opened up about Mariah. I'm worried that the carnival owner might be involved. What do we know about Grady? He wasn't at the carnival when I went by. No one has seen him today. I was just reading up on the old guy. Seems he has more than his share of trouble with the law. A carny butting heads with the law. Shocking. Most of his crimes happened in his teens and early 20s. Stealing, assault, drunk in public. But he seems to have settled down by his late 20s. Or at least he got older and wiser and just managed to stay out of trouble. How does he know Charlotte? Her stepfather, more or less. I'm not sure if the marriage to Charlotte and Mariah's mother was legal. How long has he been running the carnival? 30 years. Wow, okay, 30 years. Rockoff read the file. Mariah Wells did die. The medical examiner also reported severe bruising around her face and neck, and the report claims she had sex hours before dying. Nasty way for a girl to die. Yeah. How did Grady end up with baby Sooner? He swore to Charlotte that he'd put Sooner up for adoption, but he never did. And that makes him evil why? Rockoff sat back in his chair. Because Charlotte said he was jealous of Mariah's dates, that they fought a lot, and he's reminding me more and more of a lover rather than a father. Lover to Mariah? She wrinkled her face in disgust. He'd have to have been about 40 to her 16 when Sooner was conceived. Not the first time an older man took advantage of a young girl. So he knocks up his stepdaughter and then flies into a jealous rage when she dates another boy and kills her. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. A DNA test would confirm Sooner's paternity. That will take weeks, and it doesn't explain how he could be linked to the current murders. Rockoff flipped through the pages of the medical examiner's report. He clicked through the details. Defensive wounds on her hands, tissue fibers under her fingernails, bruises on her arms. And then he found a detail that made him sit a little straighter. Shit. What? The killer wrote on her body with a pen. What did he write? Witch. Shit. The letters are faded, but the word is unmistakable. He tapped his finger on the desk. Let me see the current missing persons reports. We have an identification on the victim, Rockoff said. He stood in Deacon Garrison's office door not a half hour after he'd spoken with Sinclair about Mariah. He held a missing person file in his hand. Garrison motioned for Rockoff to come into his office and have a seat. Tell me. Her name is Dr. Maya Jones. She's a history teacher at the local community college. She missed all her classes on Monday and Tuesday, and so her boss went by her apartment to check on her. She wasn't home, and newspapers had piled in front of her door. Her colleague got worried and called the cops. You're positive. Fingerprints match. Did she have any connection to Diane Young? The carnival stub, but neither woman was seen at the carnival. Young made her living in astrology and tarot. Dr. Jones researched witches. Our killer has a thing about the occult. Specifically women. He shifted his stance. We also have a cold case, a Mariah Wells. She grew up in the carnival and was drowned 18 years ago. The coroner noted that the killer wrote on her chest. The murder was never solved. Rockoff pulled out the picture and handed it to Garrison. Witch, but no tattoos. He used a marker. Maybe she was his first kill. Garrison sat back in his chair and pinched the bridge of his nose. Any hits on violent crimes database? None yet. I'm trying to track down Grady Tate, the owner of the carnival. I want to talk to him, and I want a list of the towns he's visited in the last 18 years. Lots of small jurisdictions that might not put a murder in the system. Assuming the bodies were even found. The responding officers in the Mariah Wells case noted that her body had been moved after she was murdered. Was she positioned like our victims? No. In fact, her face was covered with a handkerchief. The killer showing signs of remorse? Rockoff pulled out a photo of the crime scene. I think so. Her hands are crossed over her chest. It's almost like we're dealing with two different people. Garrison studied the picture. Or our killer is simply evolving. He's just gotten better, more efficient, and less remorseful. Saying she was his first. What was it about her that made him snap and cross over into the world of killers? He hadn't fully developed his system when he killed her. And because she was his first, maybe the killing was more emotional than he'd expected. Maybe. He's certainly gotten over his guilt. What's next? I'm headed over to the community college to speak to Maya's department chair, see if she had any stalkers or troublemakers. Keep me posted. Rockoff arrived at the community college's campus, parked, and made his way into the third industrial brick building and down a polished hallway to the last office on the left. The sign outside read, Max Boxwood, Ph.D., Department of History. He knocked. Dr. Boxwood? A tall, trim man lifted his red-rimmed eyes from a German newspaper. Thick, dark hair swept over his turtleneck collar, giving him a boyish look despite crow's feet that suggested he'd passed 40. Yes? Detective Rockoff, Alexandria Police. Thank you for waiting for me. Dr. Boxwood folded his paper and rose. Of course. Anything I can do to help. We're all really torn up about Maya. No one can believe it. He motioned for Rockoff to sit in the chair by his desk. The office was small but neatly organized. The wall behind Boxwood's metal desk and the one to the right were filled with floor-to-ceiling shelves packed full of books. Neat stacks of periodicals covered the floor behind his chair. The desktop was clean, cluttered only with a closed laptop and a coffee cup. Rockoff took his seat and pulled a slim notebook and pen from his breast pocket. You knew Dr. Maya Jones well? Boxwood nodded. We worked together the last few years. And I'll tell you before anyone else does, we were sleeping together. But it wasn't like we had a relationship. It was just sex. What's it called? Friends with benefits? Rockoff hated the term because Charlotte had used it. Hell, he couldn't even say they were friends, or if there'd be more benefits. It wasn't serious between you two? No, in fact, I'm engaged to marry another woman. His irritation grew. And Maya was okay with that? Sure, she knew the ground rules. Rockoff sat back in his chair. When's the last time you slept with Maya? A few weeks ago. And you two parted on good terms? Boxwood's brows rose. Of course, we were friends. Your fiancé know about Maya? Hey, it's not how it sounds. An edge had crept into Boxwood's voice. How does it sound? Like I'm betraying my fiancé? I'm not. I love her. I want to spend the rest of my life with her. So your fiancé doesn't know about Dr. Jones? Helen? No. You sure? Boxwood frowned. Helen would never hurt Maya. She might not see the benefits as inconsequential as you do. Boxwood shook his head. Helen does not know about Maya, so she cannot be a suspect. He cleared his voice. And I'd like to keep it that way. As long as it doesn't get in the way of the investigation. Look, I'm trying to be open with you. And I appreciate that, but my guess is that you are open because your relationship was so secret. Not in the department. And no one would have leaked your affair to Helen? No, why would they? Maybe you pissed someone off. It doesn't take much with some people. Everyone likes me here. I am respected and valued. Right. He noted Helen's name in his book. Was Dr. Jones seeing anyone else? He seemed grateful for the shift in conversation. I don't think so, but I don't know. I'd like a list of her students. I'll get you a printout. She have problems with her students? Not that I know of, and if she did, she didn't tell me. She have any favorite hangouts? She was crazy for the Just Java coffee shop. Went there almost daily. Just Java was the coffee shop near the wharf. He wrote the name in his book and circled it. If her killer had been stalking her, someone could have noticed him. Her field of expertise was the Salem witch trials? It was. She'd been working on a book and even got herself written up in the papers last year at just about this time. The reporter was writing a piece on the history of witches, and he interviewed Maya. The article ran right before Halloween. So Maya had not been toiling away privately. Her work had gone public, which unfortunately expanded the field of suspects. Do you have a copy of the article? I'll take you to her office. It's framed and on her wall. Boxwood grabbed a set of keys from his desk and led Rockoff 3 doors down the gray hallway. He opened the door and clicked on the light. This office was 30% smaller than Boxwood's, and it contained double the books, paper stacks, and magazines. A poster of Salem, Massachusetts decorated one wall. On the other wall was a poster of Bewitched next to the Wizard of Oz. Behind her desk was the framed article of her featured in the Post. The large article took up most of the events page and featured Dr. Jones holding a broomstick and wearing a hat.
She was fascinated about society's view of witches, Boxwood said.
Looks like the author is making fun of her.
She agreed to the get-up because she knew it would catch readers' attention.
And it did?
Her class enrollment for the spring semester rose 20%.
He leaned in and read a quote. I am fascinated by the fact that society is so afraid of witches, who for the most part were simply strong women with strong opinions.
Maya spent most of this past summer in Salem digging through archives. She'd chosen one woman who was hung during the trials and was trying to recreate the woman's life.
Rockoff glanced at the stacks of papers on her desk.
Did she receive any threats? If she did, she never said a word to me or anyone else.
Did she ever mention Diane Young?
He flinched. The other woman killed. No, she didn't know her.
Did she visit the carnival?
She didn't usually go in for that kind of thing, but a student left tickets on her desk, so she went.
Which student?
She never could figure it out.
He pushed trembling fingers through his hair.
Christ, who would do something like this?
That's what we're trying to figure out. Tears welled in Boxwood's eyes, and his voice cracked when he spoke.
She didn't deserve this.
No one does. Rockoff and Sinclair arrived at Just Java a little after 4:30. Most of the round tables were full with patrons holding coffee cups, and the place buzzed with conversations punctuated by the hiss of cappuccino machines. As it had before, it smelled of cinnamon and coffee. The detectives moved to the front cash register and showed the young cashier their badges. The kid doled out change to a customer and wiped his hands on his green apron. You guys back again?
Afraid so.
Rockoff pulled out the Department of Motor Vehicles photo of Maya Jones.
Has she been in the shop lately?
The kid shrugged. That's Dr. Jones. Haven't seen her in a few days. She's a regular. She in trouble or something?
No, Rockoff said.
She wasn't the woman killed at the wharf.
No. Did you serve her?
I did. She always gets the skinny latte with extra foam and a cookie on Fridays. Nice lady. Did she meet anyone here? Sinclair said. Honestly, I couldn't tell you, but ask Katrina. She's our waitress, and she gets around the room. I'm stuck behind the metal dragon. He patted the cash register and smiled.
Is she here? Rockoff said.
Yeah, on the floor. He pointed to a tall, slim woman with long, dark hair.
Thanks.
Sure. The detectives cut through the crowd and approached the waitress. She balanced a tray full of dirty dishes as she approached.
Katrina.
Rockoff pulled out his badge. That's right. She blew long, dark bangs out of her eyes. What do you need?
We're looking for this woman.
Again, he showed Dr. Jones's picture. Maya. She's cool.
When's the last time you saw her?
Dark eyes grew wary. Last Friday?
You're sure?
Yeah, it was cookie day. She always gets cookies on Fridays, and she always tips well on Fridays.
Was she alone?
She came in alone, but then moved to the table of a man. Rockoff tucked Dr. Jones's picture back in his breast pocket.
Did you recognize the man?
He'd been in a couple of times, kept to himself, always tipped exactly 15%. Did he approach her? Sinclair said. I don't know, but they seem to be talking about a book. Maya loves to read. She moved to his table, and they chatted happily. I know she's been dating a louse, so it was nice to see her meet someone else.
What did he look like?
Katrina frowned. Medium height, light-colored hair, mustache, baggy sweatshirt, acted like he was in his 50s, but he gave off a younger vibe. Good memory, Sinclair said. Folks don't usually remember so well. I remember how people tip. I'm kind of a savant that way, but I don't usually remember people.
Why was he different? Rockoff said.
He bled on the table.
What?
Yeah, not when he was here with Maya, but about a week before. He came back and wiped up something on the table and then left. I checked behind him and saw drops of blood on the floor near his chair.
Did he appear injured?
No bandages or anything, but it was definitely blood I cleaned up. I threw the washcloth right in the trash. Would you be willing to meet with a sketch artist and help him work up a picture?
Sure. Who is this guy?
We're trying to find that out.
Did something happen to Maya?
I can't say right now. She shoved out a breath.
Shit. You'd have told me she was fine if she was.
They asked Katrina a few more questions before releasing her back to work. Outside, Rockoff rested his hands on his hips. He came back because he knew he was bleeding.
Why was he bleeding?
I wish the hell that I knew. Too bad she threw the rag out. Yeah, he glanced down the street at the wharf. He dumps one victim down the block and kidnaps another from here. He knows this area. It's his hunting ground. So what now? We beat the pavement and canvass the shops and ask about Dr. Maya Jones and Mystery Man. When Charlotte shut down her computer, it was past 8. Bone-tired, she had a throbbing headache. She glanced at her calendar. Each day was packed with appointments and notes. She flipped the page to November and noted the first week of the new month was just as slammed as October. She didn't see white space, breathing space as she liked to call it, until mid-November. Longingly, she glanced at the Saturdays in November. The first few weeks would be spent putting her new place in order, and, of course, Thanksgiving was open as always. For the last few years, she'd worked on the holiday, but perhaps this year she'd invite Sooner over for a meal. Home-cooked took on a whole and not-so-positive meaning when linked to her, but she'd see that the girl had a decent meal. The front bell rang, startling her. She glanced at the monitor behind her desk. Rockoff stood by the door, his hands casually in his pocket. Casual, that was probably the worst word anyone used to describe him. He possessed an intensity that carried over from his work into the bedroom. She closed her eyes and imagined the look on his face the last time he'd pushed into her. He'd been staring at her, gauging her reaction, even trying to read her mind. They'd both promised that sex was just sex, no attachments, no commitments. But she'd sensed in that moment he was starting to have feelings for her. That's why in the parking lot she'd told him no more meetings. No sex, no touches, no contact. And yet here he was now. Sighing, she rose, smoothed her skirt, and walked to the front door. She flipped the locks and opened the door. "Detective, what brings you to my neck of the woods?" His expression was unreadable, even as his gaze lingered on her. "Have you seen Grady?" "No, I haven't." The edge of disappointment did surprise her. Of course he'd come about work. "What about Sooner?" "I saw her last night." She stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. She closed and locked the door behind him. "She's opening a shop on Washington Street. She's leaving the carnival." "Does Grady know?" "He does, and he's not happy about her leaving." She sighed. "What kind of relationship did he have with Mariah?" The shift tipped her off balance for a moment. "I've told you, he was her stepfather." "Was there more to it?" "More?" Her face paled. "You mean sexually?" "Yes." Her stomach felt hollow. "He couldn't have done that." "Why not? She was lovely." "He was 30 years her senior." "Age doesn't stop abusers." She shook her head in denial, even as the old memories flooded. "Grady always favored Mariah. He'd spent extra time with her. He didn't like it when boys wanted to date her." She closed her eyes. "It explains so much." "Like what?" "The way she'd tease him with the news of a date. She knew he hated it." "Is he Sooner's father?" "No, I told you it was that boy, the one with a fictitious name, Matt Davis." "How can you be sure?" "I know." His eyes narrowed. "And she never told anyone who had fathered Sooner?" "We never talked about the baby's father." "Maybe that's why Grady kept Sooner, because she was his." "No, Grady is not Sooner's father." He'd kept Sooner to punish her for leaving. "Why are you asking all these questions? What have you found out about Mariah?"